Chapter 26-25. From afar, Mutsang and the rest saw a graceful and slender young lady. Her face was cold and exquisite, and her eyes were as deep as ice and snow. Dressed in white, she expressionlessly walked toward them with a memorial tablet in her arms. Everyone's gazes involuntarily froze. Mu Jingfeng, who was standing behind Mutsang, was even more stunned. He stood there in a daze as he stared somewhat absent-mindedly at the young lady dressed in white. In a split second, time seemed to have stunned that old time. The mountains and rivers seemed to have blossomed into the most enchanting beauty under the young lady's feet. Mu Jingfeng seemed to be able to see the woman in the bright red dress slowly walking toward him through this icy figure. His internal organs seemed to have been tightly gripped in an instant, and they were all tightly clenched together. She died. Old Master Mu was also completely stunned. His gaze turned sluggishly to Mu Jingrui behind him. Mu Jingrui was also in a daze for quite a while. When his gaze met Old Master Mu's, he was completely stupefied. No, he had always thought that his sister-in-law had only gone missing. It should be said that all the information the Mu family had gathered was that Long Chuyun had miraculously disappeared after giving birth. How did Jojo find out that her mother was already dead? Mu Jingrui had investigated for a long time and sorted out a series of clues before setting the tracking direction on Seacombe Planet. Before this, who would have known that the dignified matriarch of the Mu family would run to such a remote and desolate lower star domain like Seacombe Planet? When they first met, Jojo asked him about her birth mother's name. He didn't say it because he felt that he didn't know where to start. What should he say? Say that your mother was originally the madam of our family and that you had a lot of good days ahead of you. Say that the reason you ended up on Seacombe Planet was all your mother's doing. Say that after your mother gave birth to you, she threw you to your adoptive parents and irresponsibly went missing. How could he, as an uncle, say these words? How could he bear to say them? But now Mu Jingrui stared speechlessly at the young lady before him. Her cold expression was as cold as ice and frost, chilling to the bone. There wasn't the slightest bit of tenderness or warmth in her pitch-black eyes. There was only the glint and shadow of a sword, indifferent and emotionless. Kneel! The ceremonial official shouted again. All of the Mu family's juniors, gnashing their teeth, lowered their heads and kneeled. He kowtowed again and again. Mu Ruyan and Mu Royan's fingernails unknowingly pierced into their palms. This kind of stifling depression was too stifling. On what basis? Why did they have to kneel in front of this woman and look at her cold eyes as she looked at them from above? On what basis? On what basis did they, the dignified young ladies of the Mu family, have to kneel to this bastard? As for Mu Rochuan, who was following behind Madame Mu, the anger in her heart had already soared to the extreme. A memorial tablet. This arrogant little girl was actually hugging a memorial tablet and walking over. She actually wanted all of the Mu clan's disciples and juniors to kneel and worship this woman who had been dead for God knows how many years, and who might not even have a corpse left. Such a grand occasion. What would happen to her mother, Mu Qingya's reputation? As for Mu Xingchen, he was already in a daze. He felt like a joke. He said that he didn't hate her, but he was very clear that he harbored resentment and hatred towards this biological mother of his. He hated her for leaving without saying goodbye and resented her for abandoning her son. However, when he saw his mother's memorial tablet, it was as if a mountain had suddenly collapsed. Suddenly collapsing like a mountain torrent, it turned out that he had long lost his mother. Chapter 26-26. Old Master Mu takes a deep breath and is about to speak. Suddenly, a Mu clan disciple rushed out of the crowd and harumphed righteously. Mu clan disciple, Mu De. I challenge you. That young man pointed at Arbor, who was hugging the memorial tablet, and coldly said, "Let me see what qualifications you have to make us Mu clan disciples kneel to you." And that slut of a mother, in the blink of an eye, a swift and fierce white figure whizzed in front of that fool like a streak of cold light. Mu Jingxing was alarmed, and he abruptly jumped up and shouted, "Duh!" Boom! That young man was slapped by the back of his head, and his entire body was pressed to the ground with his head facing down. He fiercely smashed into the ground with a bang and prostrated himself before kowtowing. The surroundings were dead silent. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at this scene. The little girl's sudden burst of speed and strength simply shocked everyone. "Where are the crown princess's personal guards?" A stern rebuke rang out. Hui Feng led a group of black-clothed youths to Arbor's side and knelt on one knee as they called out in unison, "Present." "Kill him." Hui Feng and the others drew their swords in unison and slashed at the young man on the ground without a word. "No, don't." Mu Jingxing's pupils contracted, and he hastily shouted to stop them. "You can't kill him, he's your cousin." Mystic energy was attached to the long swords, and there were 7 to 8 strands of power that uniformly rushed at the young man on the ground. "Hold on." Elder Mu's pupils contracted, and he hastily summoned a fire spirit and tossed it above Muda with a whoosh to help him resist the attacks of Hui Feng and the others. In the blink of an eye, Arbor took out his ferule and slapped it down. It ruthlessly landed on Muda's left arm. Crack! Accompanied by the sound of bones shattering, the pupils of everyone present shrunk. Ruthless. Vicious. This was the first impression everyone in the Mu clan had of the young crown princess. Ah! Muda rolled on the ground. His eyes flashed with anger. He subconsciously stretched out his hand to summon a long sword from his mind. "Cut it!" Arbor roared and ordered expressionlessly. The fleeting swan dagger jumped out with a whoosh and fiercely collided with Mold's sword with a thunderous momentum. By the waist. Cut off. The entire long sword had no power to resist and was directly cut into 2 at the waist. All of the Mu family's disciples gasped. He could only watch helplessly as Muda's consciousness was damaged and he spat out blood. This was his second impression of the little crown princess. Cold-blooded. Berserk Arbor made a prompt decision to pursue and attack. He immediately flew up and arrived in front of Mold again. Then, he smashed his ferule towards Mold's head. "Junior, you dare." Mu Jingxing's eyes widened. Just as he was about to rush forward, Grandpa Mu stopped him. Grandpa Mu sighed. He only lightly flicked his sleeve and stabilized the little fellow's ferule. Mo Lian's eyes turned cold. She flashed to Arbor's side and coldly looked at Grandpa Mu. "Grandpa, it's best if you don't interfere in this matter. Otherwise, this crown prince will make your whole family suffer." Grandpa Mu sighed again. "I'm old. I can't bear to see the juniors killing each other in front of me. Jojo, for Grandpa's sake, can you spare him this time?" "Compensation. Grandpa will compensate you." Mo Lian silently lowered her eyes. Grandpa Mu seemed to have investigated his Jojo quite a bit. The 8th watch ended. Chapter 26-27. Grandpa will compensate you according to the list from before. The old man suddenly said. Mu Jingrui's feet slipped, and he almost fell to the ground. "My father. The moment you spoke up, you sold out the Mu clan once again. There is a fool, don't lower yourself to his level." The old man said again. If he wasn't a fool, why would he jump out at this time and be the bird that stuck its head out? The old man was very clear on who was instigating from behind. His cold eyes indifferently swept over the Mu family's juniors. Everyone couldn't help but lower their heads. "Qiao Qiao." The old man called out again. "He spoke rudely and insulted my mother in front of everyone just now. Xiao Mu gazed coldly at the old man. Do you think that a mere batch of supplies will be able to let this matter pass so easily? In your eyes, who am I, and who is my mother? This person publicly insulted the crown princess mother. In his eyes, who is the crown princess, and who is the crown prince? Arbor's calm and indifferent voice clearly fell into everyone's ears. Mu Zong's breathing slightly choked, and he had a bad premonition. At this moment, he also felt an extreme headache. This child, Mu De, was second brother's child. He was born slow-witted, and he didn't learn the slightest bit of second brother's shrewdness. This time, he had really dug a pit for himself. Even if everyone in this world looks down on my mother, even if everyone stands on the opposite side of my mother, even if there's no one to protect her, I will also protect her at all costs. Mu Xingqian stood behind his father. For some reason, tears inexplicably rolled down his cheeks as he looked at this abnormally calm and cold little girl. He really had a lot of things he wanted to say to her. He really wanted to tell her that it was impossible for her to be alone. Big brother would protect her. Big brother meant what he said. Old man Mu fell silent. Arbor directly pulled out a dagger and threw it at Muda's feet with a clang. His voice revealed a trace of desolate loneliness and boundless indifference. Take your own life. Lest this crown princess does it herself. There wasn't a trace of sound at the scene. Even the sound of everyone's breathing became weaker. He wasn't sure what he was feeling right now. He only felt that when the little girl's eyes, which were like ice pearls in a cold pond, looked at him, it was as if there were ice shards moving in her eyes. Mulder's conscience had been damaged since just now. At this moment, he was looking at Arbor with a dejected expression. He was feeling quite upset. At the side, Mu Jingxing's eyes widened as he suddenly exclaimed, Mu Qiao. Don't go overboard. Mu Qiao. Xiao Mu's head turned bit by bit, and her flickering eyes stared coldly at the Mu family's second uncle. Who are you calling? You. Mu Jingxing was infuriated. Didn't you make such a big fuss just to return to the Mu family grandly? Since that was the case, what's wrong with calling you Mu Qiao? Mu Qiao. Mu Qiao. Xiao Mu muttered these two words coldly as she slowly inched forward. Everyone felt that when she spoke these two words, her expression seemed to be especially mocking, especially sarcastic, and the space between her brows actually contained a faint sense of desolation and coldness. It was pitiful and terrifying. In her previous life, she actually didn't even know this name until her death. From the day she found out about her identity, the two words Mu Qiao had already been abandoned by her. She didn't need it. Chapter 26-28. She didn't return to the Mu residence this time because she wished so much to go back and regain that ridiculous kinship and kindness. It was because she wanted to go back and find out the truth. She couldn't let her mother die without knowing the truth. She couldn't let herself die without knowing the truth in her previous life. She wanted to peel away the layers of fog in front of her and find the most primitive truth. So, Mu Qiao. These two words had long been discarded by her. Her surname was Qiao. As long as her surname was Qiao, her surname would be Qiao for life. Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. How ironic. In her previous life, when she was alone and helpless and struggling on the verge of death, she wanted so much to have a family and a strong backing that could protect her warmly. The little girl suddenly threw her head back and laughed out loud. Her laughter was cold and sarcastic. But now, she already had Lien. She had a sect, a master, an adoptive father and mother, and a younger brother and sister. She really didn't need anything else. She hugged Long Chuyun's memorial tablet and slowly walked forward. Like a wisp of flowing cloud, it also seemed like a thin piece of snow crystal. Just like this, it was empty and unhurried. Sorrow and coldness gently brushed past everyone's hearts. Jojo was very unhappy. Mo Lien's heart twisted tightly as if it was being scratched by a cat. His footsteps moved slightly, and his eyes darkened. For a moment, he just wanted to pounce over and hug this little girl tightly to comfort her. However, he still managed to control himself. He firmly suppressed the desire to embrace her. Jojo. Old Master Mu's heart trembled slightly, and he softly called out to her. Erda was insensible and insulted your mother. He was wrong, but he didn't deserve to die. Can you spare his life? Father. Mu Jingxing angrily said. Erda merely scolded her out of spite. How did it escalate to the level of life and death? Shut up. Old Master Mu angrily glared at Mu Jingxing, who was causing trouble, and continued, Jojo, Grandpa is willing to compensate you double. And I'll make Erda kneel in the ancestral hall for a month until you forgive him. Xiao Mu coldly turned around and gazed at Old Master Mu with a bone-chilling gaze. She expressionlessly declared, I will never forgive him. It doesn't matter if he didn't mean what he said, or if he was brainlessly ordered by someone else. Since he dared to insult my mother in broad daylight, he must pay the price in blood. From the day I walked out of hell, I told myself. In this lifetime. No one can climb on top of Arbor's head and behave atrociously. No one can make me smile and forgive him after slapping me in the face. You can't. Not even your whole family. I swore to Danghua that as long as I want to protect someone, even if all the gods and Buddhas are my enemies, I will not flinch. I'll kill whoever blocks my way. The entire area in front of Luxing Gate was completely silent. Arbor slightly shook his wrist and a small porcelain bottle rolled to Mulder's feet. Since you can't speak, then never speak. Be a mute for the rest of your life or die. Choose one. Mulder raised his head to look at Old Master Mu, whose eyes were slightly closed. He shakily reached out to grab the porcelain bottle on the ground and looked at his father, Mu Jingxing, for help. Big brother. Father. Mu Jingxing then looked at Mu Jingfeng and Mu Tsang. Mu Jingfeng's expression was somewhat absent-minded. Mu Tsang let out a long sigh. Chapter 26-29. Arbor's gaze was cold as she raised her head to glance at the old man. She saw that the old man was looking at her with sparkling eyes without the slightest bit of hostility. She could sense whether he was sincere or not. This child had been a very sensitive person since she was young, so she could see through people's hearts more clearly than anyone else. At least from her point of view, the old man was still somewhat sincere. Jojo. Mo Lien walked to her side and sighed in relief before reaching out to hold her small hand. In short, no one could bully his Jojo if Mu Tsang, this old man, really didn't know how to appreciate favors. He definitely wouldn't let the old man off so easily. Arbor nodded her small head at him, indicating that she was fine and for him to set his mind at ease. Mo Lien then gently released her small hand, and his expression relaxed slightly as he retreated a few steps back. This time, it was the old man's turn to breathe a sigh of relief. Earlier, Prince Mo's aura was truly too stifling when he came over. Neither of these two were to be trifled with. Others might not have noticed, but the old man did. Ever since the little fellow made a move, the entire scene had sunk into a deathly silence. It was practically possible to hear a pin drop. Which of the Mu family's juniors had this kind of aura? The little fellow's gaze truly made one's heart feel very heavy. Mu Jingfeng finally found his dry voice and stepped forward to ask, "Why would your mother?" Arbor didn't even look at him as she coldly stared at Mu De. "Do you need me to find someone to help you?" Mu De shuddered. At this moment, he was already filled with regret. "No one can save you." Arbor coldly threw down this sentence, her gaze sweeping over Hui Feng and the others. Since this coward doesn't dare to make a move himself, you guys help him. Yes. Mu Qiao. You shut up. Arbor abruptly turned around and glared at second Uncle Mu, who had shouted her name. Don't change my name without my permission. I'm Arbor. I'll be using this name for the rest of my life. You don't have the right to change it. Mu Jingxing's heart actually shrunk slightly from the little girl's pitch-black eyes that resembled icy pearls. What's the matter with your mother? Mu Jingfeng could not help but ask. Qiao Mu turned around and cast her father a bone-chilling, shallow, and frigid gaze. Mu Jingfeng felt as if he had been stabbed by this gaze, and his entire body trembled. She looked so much like that woman. The same arrogance, and the same disdain for him. The anger in his chest suddenly seemed to explode as it surged up violently. Arbor. What's with that look? Did you not hear what I asked you? Master. Mu Qingya's eyelids twitched, and she hurriedly reached out to grab Mu Jingfeng's arm. She tugged hard and whispered, What are you doing? What a hypocrite. Arbor coldly spat out a few words, a trace of disdain in his eyes, and ordered, Let him eat. Without another word, Hui Feng and the others grabbed Mu Da's arm and forced him to swallow the pill in the bottle. Mu Jingxing wanted to step forward to stop them but was stopped by Mu Tsang. The elderly man sighed wearily. Don't complicate matters anymore. Cough, 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 cough. Mu Da clutched his throat in horror and coughed desperately, as if he wanted to spit out that pill. However, that pill melted in his mouth and had long been digested to God knows where. Chapter 26:30. Mu Da opened his mouth but suddenly realized that he had lost his voice. He looked at his father, Mu Jingxing, with a flustered expression. He was truly afraid and truly regretful. If he had known earlier that the little fiend's methods were so vicious, he would not have stood out in front of the Mu family's children and acted as the bird that stood out. He wanted to suppress the little lady's spirit, but unexpectedly, he was suppressed to the point that he could not breathe. Mu Jingfeng stood at the side. He was so angered by the little lady's words that he could not breathe properly. His emotions were on a roller coaster ride. Arbor directly hugged Long Chuyun's memorial tablet and quickened his footsteps toward the Mu family's residence. Mu Jingfeng followed a few steps behind and angrily roared, You unfilial daughter, stop right there. Speak. Why did she die? Arbor abruptly turned around and mockingly stared at Mu Jingfeng. Why did she die? You don't know. Since you don't know, then don't ever know in this lifetime. Mu Jingfeng's heart was stifled. His stifled emotions nearly caused him to be unable to breathe smoothly. You've already retreated from her life long ago. You don't have the right to know anything about her. You. Mu Jingfeng angrily glared at him. I don't need your fake affection and concern. Give your fake feelings to those who need them. Arbor abruptly raised his voice and angrily roared, drowning out the words that Mu Jingfeng wanted to say. That pair of pitch-black eyes coldly stared at him, and his voice was so cold and emotionless that it seemed to have been fished out from the other side of the Yellow Springs. As a husband, you can't even protect your own wife. As a father, you haven't fulfilled the slightest bit of a father's duty. As a man, you can't even protect a woman. As the head of the Mu family, a 1,000-year-old family, you don't even know when and where your wife died. Why did she die, or who killed her, you don't even know. What right do you have to question me? What right do you have to stand here and shout at me? You're so laughable. Arbor, watch your words and attitude. You can. Arbor sternly shouted, drowning out Mu Jingfeng's voice. Arbor pointed a finger at him, his pitch-black almond eyes wide as he pressed on. Heaven and earth above, the sun and moon are shining. Mu Jingfeng, Do you dare to swear in the name of the Mu family's ancestors that you've never done anything to let her down in this lifetime? Do you dare to kneel in front of the ancestors of the Mu family and tell them that you have the slightest bit of benevolence, righteousness, and love for this daughter of yours? You didn't. The entire Lushing sect, both inside and outside, was suppressed by a heavy atmosphere. Everyone lowered their heads, not daring to raise their heads to look at the patriarch's deflated appearance. If you had the slightest bit of pity for me, the person I saw on Seekong planet wouldn't have been Mu Jingrui, but you. If you have even the slightest bit of fatherly love for me, Arbor suddenly smiled, the coldness in his smile reaching deep into his eyes. Perhaps she tilted her head and her gaze seemed to be looking through him into the distance. You will be like a ray of starlight when that person is at his loneliest and most helpless. You will give that person a little bit of light. Even if it's just a little. Mu Jingfeng was speechless. However, Arbor coldly turned around and continued to carry his mother's memorial tablet forward. Prince Mo's heart had long ached terribly. What he couldn't bear to see the most was Jojo's cold and lonely gaze, as if her body was here, but her heart was far away. It was as if he wouldn't be able to hold on to the little lady in the next second. Chapter 26:31. Mo Lien floated to Arbor's side and reached out to hold her small hand, wrapping it in a warm embrace. Jojo, I'll go back with you. We'll face it together, no matter what. Arbor retracted her misty gaze and glanced back at him. The corners of her lips curled up as she tried her best to give him a smile. Mo Lien's heart ached as he watched. He held her small hand tightly and said softly, "You don't have to force yourself. No matter if you laugh or cry, I'll accept all of your emotions. What I want to see is the real Jojo. Don't force a smile in front of me. I won't bear to." Prince Mo reached out to gently caress her small face. Arbor blinked and nodded. Prince Mo reached out to take the memorial tablet in her arms and said softly, "Count me in as the one protecting our mother. Mother, thank you for giving birth to Jojo. Thank you for bestowing me with such a good Jojo. No matter what happens in the past, present, or future, I'll always be by Jojo's side to take care of her, protect her, and accompany her. I'll never leave her. Mother, you can rest assured." Arbor glanced at him and looked at the man beside her who was as graceful as a startled swan. He held his mother's memorial tablet and muttered something as he walked. She couldn't help but want to cry and laugh at the same time. What was she afraid of? The most difficult moment was already over. The future would only get better and better. What wasn't good would only be enemies. Behind her, Mu Tsang's heart sank a little. He brought Mu Jingfeng and the other children, as well as the thousands of Mu family disciples, and followed the little fellow's footsteps. This time, Changle Street really boiled over. Although they didn't see the scene in front of Lushing Gate, everyone clearly saw the scene of His Highness the Crown Prince holding the little Crown Princess's hand and slowly walking over while holding the memorial tablet. The Crown Prince. The Crown Prince actually held the little Crown Princess's hand and sent the Crown Princess's mother's memorial tablet back to the Mu family together. For a moment, the entire imperial capital was in an uproar. Everyone rushed to spread the news. Those who were there to watch the show sighed with emotion. Who said that His Highness the Crown Prince brought the little Crown Princess back from the lower star region for fun? Who said that after the Crown Prince returned to the imperial capital, he would sooner or later kick this unpresentable Crown Princess away? Rumors, rumors. Rumors. His Highness the Crown Prince clearly valued this Crown Princess more than anyone else. Looking at the degree of rarity in front of him, it was clear that he was crying out in pain as if he had obtained a treasure. It had to be said that they really looked like a pair of celestial immortals. Who said they weren't compatible? Both of them were dressed in plain white robes and had fine black hair. They held hands as they walked over. Her beauty was unparalleled throughout the ages. She's in crown to cover the capital. This was simply too much for them. The crown prince and the crown princess's outstanding appearance, in addition to their gazes, lingered with shallow feelings. This was simply too much for single people. The commoners on the street couldn't help but cheer. The crown prince held the little crown princess's hand and slowly walked through Changle Street. The commoners along the street couldn't help but kneel down and greet the crown prince and the crown princess. The two held hands as they walked through the street. They looked at each other and smiled faintly. Needless to say, with their looks and bearing, they inadvertently gained countless fans along the way. The crown prince and the crown princess are simply too compatible. Alas, this makes me believe what the storybooks say. What does it mean to have the bearing of a phoenix and the bearing of a phoenix? Chapter 2632. Wherever the two of them passed, words like this could be heard endlessly. Prince Mo was very happy to hear it. Like he said, the commoners had good taste. He was the most compatible with Jojo, the most compatible. In a private room on the second floor of Kai-Dai Pavilion, a pair of dark green eyes were coldly looking at the two people passing by on Changle Street. He just coldly and silently looked at them. Even though he did not show his emotions, the fingers holding the teacup were tightly curled. In front of Qin Xian's eyes, there seemed to be a dim yellow painting that flashed by. He saw the little person in the painting dressed in red being led out by the matron of honor. Her head was lowered and a little round chin was revealed. He saw himself looking at that person with a faint smile. His heart was filled with happiness and satisfaction. He saw himself holding the little person's hand. He saw himself holding her hand as they walked step by step to the front of the wedding hall. It was his. His breathing suddenly became irregular, sometimes high and sometimes low, as if something in his chest was about to explode. It was like there was a terrifying hand that was tightly holding his heart. Bit by bit, it was going to pull him into the abyss. Wrong, it was all wrong. Everything was wrong. It shouldn't be like this. This wasn't how life was supposed to develop, was it? That little person clearly belonged to him. Why was she being held in another person's hand? He shook his head heavily and suddenly stood to sweep away the cup in front of him. He rushed to the window. Second brother, what are you doing? Qin Xian, who had a melancholy expression, was frightened by his second brother's large movement. He quickly stood to block the window. Go away. Qin Xian pushed him aside. Below, Crown Prince Mo, who was passing by Kai-Dai Pavilion's entrance, seemed to have sensed something. He abruptly raised his head and just so happened to meet Qin Xian's malicious gaze. The crown prince furrowed his brows and his hand unconsciously tightened. Qin Xian's two hands tightly gripped the wooden window frame. His eyes seemed to shoot out sharp arrows and poisonous light. He wanted to kill him. Kill this person and take back everything that belonged to him. Let everything return to the right track. Arbor was about to look up when the crown prince suddenly grabbed his hand. He didn't even have time to look up before the crown prince dragged him past Kai-Dai brothel. Prince, there's no need to look at unrelated people. Qin Xian's fingers turned white as she gripped the window frame tightly. She could hear the raging anger in her heart. The pain in his heart was unbearable, as if it had exploded. He didn't know what was going on, but it seemed like a strange memory would surface every once in a while. Every time she saw Jojo, as long as she saw Jojo, there would always be some memories that didn't belong to her, yet seemed to belong to her, silently floating to the surface. Jojo, who are you? What is my relationship with you? Qin Xian carefully waved his hand in front of him. Second brother, what's wrong? When we were on Seikong planet, didn't you already know that little Jojo was married? Qin Xian said regretfully, the little girl is very good, but she already has feelings for someone else. You shouldn't pester her anymore. Qin Axian glanced at him coldly. This part of your life is wrong. Qin Xian felt that there was an abnormal light flowing in his second brother's eyes when he said this. He gave off a somewhat sinister and scary feeling. Chapter 26:33. In that instant, he was like a malicious ghost that had crawled up from the yellow springs, causing one's heart to tighten. Qin Xian reflexively looked at the ground. Second brother had a shadow strangely. Why did he suddenly think that his second brother was a malicious spirit? Eldest young Sir Qin lowered his eyes speechlessly. When he looked up again, he saw that his second brother had already left the window and exited the Kaidai veranda. The Mu estate located on the western side of the imperial capital, in the suburbs. It was surrounded by Winter Moon Mountain Forest, and the surrounding mountains were almost all the Mu estate's cultivation grounds. Of course, the Mu estate was actually only an extremely small piece of land in the entire imperial capital. At this moment, the Mu estate's main gate was wide open, and so was the middle gate. Everyone in the Mu estate, young and old, stood silently on both sides of the road, welcoming the crown prince and his wife inside with complicated expressions. Today's events on Changle Avenue and at Luxing Gate had a huge impact on the hearts of the Mu family's younger generation. This crown princess was actually the true eldest miss of the Mu estate, right? But now, the title of eldest miss had already been taken by Miss Rochuan. According to her age, the crown princess should have been the second miss, but the title of second miss had also been taken by Miss Ruyan. Speaking of which, the crown princess's situation in the Mu estate was truly a bit awkward. Since the crown princess was the crown princess, she had to be addressed as such at home. Arbor and the crown prince walked hand in hand through the Mu estate's grand gates and were led to the ancestral hall. The largest area in the northeast of the Mu estate was the disciples' resting area, while the core members of the Mu family were arranged to rest in the southeast inner court. There were many doors separating the two areas, and ordinary disciples couldn't enter the inner court at all. The west was the area for refining pills and forging weapons. The south practice field was where the clan's disciples practiced, as well as rows of sealed rooms for seclusion. The north was the conference hall. The ancestral hall was located at the end of the north, far from the main building and buried deep in the mountain forest. A stream surrounded the door, and it was a place of excellent feng shui. The steward respectfully led the crown prince and crown princess to the ancestral hall, not daring to act rashly. When they arrived in front of the ancestral hall, they subconsciously looked back at the old patriarch, Mu Tsang. The door of the ancestral hall was already open. Arbor took Long Chuyun's memorial tablet from Mo Lien and nodded at her with pursed lips. He then turned around and strode into the ancestral hall. The door of the ancestral hall closed with a creak. Arbor looked coldly at the incense burning in front of him. There were many memorial tablets placed in front of him. Arbor glanced at them one by one, and his gaze fell on the top. The name of the memorial tablet in the middle was Mu Chaoyang. This should be an ancestor-level figure of the Mu family. Arbor also put his mother's memorial tablet on it, took out a clean white cloth from his inner world, and carefully wiped it. Mother. She muttered to herself, I will seek justice for you and help you find out the truth. I will take back the pride that belongs to you. Don't worry. My daughter will not lose. She placed her mother's memorial tablet properly, then kneeled down and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Only then did she get up from the ground. Her back was ramrod straight, and she walked step by step to the door. She reached out and pulled open the heavy ancestral hall door. When the little girl's frail figure appeared at the door of the ancestral hall, Mu Xingchen felt his breath catch in his throat. The little girl looked at him with a calm expression. But he could inexplicably feel the turbulent waves suppressed in the bottom of her heart. Chapter 26:34. Mu Xingqian was also feeling extremely stifled right now. He really wanted to run up and comfort this young lady. But in the end, he felt that his words of comfort were simply pale and powerless. Mu Jingfeng's expression was completely taut. His daughter's questioning in front of Lu Xing's door earlier had caused him to lose all face, and a raging fury had also surfaced in his heart. The young lady before him was truly his daughter. She could still make him so angry that his insides burned. Mu Jingfeng took a deep breath and said with a cold expression, "Now that you've achieved your goal, what do you plan to do next, Qingya? Has the Crown Prince and Zhouzhou's court been tidied up?" Mu Tsang directly interrupted Mu Jingfeng and turned to look at Mu Qingya. Mu Qingya hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes, yes. The Magnolia Court's court has already been tidied up and arranged properly. The Crown Prince and Crown Princess can move in at any time." Mu Tsang was very confident in his wife's ability to take charge of the family. He nodded upon hearing this and said to Qiao Qiao with a smile, "Qiao Qiao, since you've returned, then stay at home for a few days. Your Highness, Zhouzhou has been separated from us for many years. It's not easy for him to return home. I hope that your Highness will allow Zhouzhou to stay at home for a while." Mu Tsang thought of the Crown Prince, who was standing at the side like a great Buddha, and hurriedly said this. "All right." His Highness the Crown Prince agreed. "Then, this solitude and Crown Princess will be troubling old clan head for the next few days." A trace of joy appeared on Mu Tsang's old face, but there was also some awkwardness between his brows. Seeing the Crown Prince's polite and distant words, the old man felt a little upset in his heart. It was originally the return of his granddaughter and grandson-in-law. Wasn't it a matter of course for them to stay for a while? Forget it, one wouldn't become fat in one go. Even if he wanted to slowly mend his relationship with Zhouzhou, he couldn't rush this moment. The old clan head sighed and turned to exhort Mu Qingya, "Keep a close eye on them. Don't let the Crown Prince and Zhouzhou's court lack anything." "Yes, your daughter-in-law will be careful. Don't worry, father." The elderly clan leader nodded, then turned to glance at his stoic-faced granddaughter. "Zhouzhou, you've just returned, so you still have to make arrangements with the Crown Prince. Once you've settled down in the Jade Orchid Garden, why don't you make a trip to grandfather's place?" Arbor raised his eyelids and glanced at the old man. Seeing his eyes full of expectation, he reluctantly nodded his head. Mu Tsang immediately became happy. He nodded and said, "Your grandmother's health isn't good. She hasn't been able to get up all these years. When you come, Grandpa will take you to see her." Arbor tilted his head noncommittally. Mu Tsang didn't say anything more to the little fellow. Seeing that she had been tired for half a day, he guessed that she must be exhausted. He hurriedly instructed the little fellow to go with the Crown Prince to Yulon Park to settle down. She turned to glare at the cold-faced Mu Jingfeng. "Come over here." After saying that, the old man strode away with his hands behind his back. Mu Qingya smiled at Arbor. It was neither overly affectionate nor overly cold. She looked at her with clear and bright eyes and said, "Zhouzhou, I'll take you to Jade Orchid Garden." "Please, your Highness." Mu Qingya politely extended her hand to invite the Crown Prince to go first. Thus, Crown Prince Mo led the way while holding the little fellow's hand. When the two walked past Mu Xingqian, they tacitly did not even look at him. 8 night watch completed. Can I return to normal? 6 night watch. Chapter 26:35. Mu Jingrui sighed and patted Mu Xingqian's shoulder. "Let's go, Xingqian. The little fellow will be staying here for the next few days. We'll definitely find a chance to mend our relationship with her." Was there a chance? Mu Xingqian turned around and glanced at Mu Jingrui. Mu Jingrui smiled encouragingly at him and nodded. I'll go check on third brother, Mu Jingzhuang hurriedly said. From the start, old third's expression had been very off. If one were to ask who the Mu family was most affected by eldest sister-in-law's death, it would probably be Mu Jingyuan. Mu Jingzhuang thought of some past events and couldn't help but sigh heavily. Go on. Mu Jingrui nodded and watched Mu Jingzhuang leave. Meanwhile, Arbor and Mo Lien followed Mu Qingya all the way to the entrance of Yulong Court. However, the layout of the courtyard wasn't small, and the inside was indeed clean and tidy. It looked quite comfortable. An old maid was leading 7 or 8 young and beautiful maidservants. They were waiting respectfully in the courtyard. Seeing their masters enter, the old maid led the group of servant girls forward to greet them. Her etiquette was also very considerate. Mu Qingya gently said, Jojo, this is Nanny Zhou. If you need anything, just tell her. She's an old servant of the residence and knows everything. She'll definitely take care of everything for you. This old servant greets Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Prince Mo and the little Crown Princess both nodded indifferently. Following behind Zhou Mama were 4 first-class maidservants. They were fat and slim and graceful. Their names were Mei Xian, Lan Xian, Zhu Xian and Zhu Xian. The others were all second and third-rank servant girls and didn't have many opportunities to show their faces in front of their masters. Arbor merely swept a glance at them before leading Caixiu and Caiqi inside. Mu Qingya smiled and said, the rooms have already been prepared. Jojo, come this way. Their room was the largest one on the south side. When they pushed open the door and walked in, they saw that the room was already spotless and tidy. Bedding, mattresses, tea sets, and cups were all present. It could be seen that the person who made the arrangements had put in a lot of effort. Mu Qingya smiled faintly at Arbor. Jojo, you and His Highness must be tired from the long journey. I won't disturb you any longer and will take my leave first. If there's anything else you need, just ask Zhou Mama to call a servant girl over and let me know. One would not slap a smiling person. Since Mu Qingya was tactful, Qiao Mu naturally would not embarrass her on the spot. She nodded and said to Mu Qingya, thank you. Mu Qingya's smile became even brighter. She waved her hand and said, you don't have to be so polite with me. All right, get back to your work. From Lu. Yes, madam. The 16 or 17-year-old girl named Song Lu hurriedly ran forward and bowed to the Crown Prince and Crown Prince Consort before hastily excusing herself with Mu Qingya. After Mu Qingya left with Song Lu and the others, Arbor turned to look at Caixiu and said, go out and tell them that if there's nothing else, they can wait in the outer court. They're not allowed to casually enter the inner court, especially the area around the south side rooms. She naturally didn't need those miscellaneous people in her inner court. The little fellow had never been a particular person. She liked peace and quiet and didn't like so many miscellaneous people popping up in front of her. It was annoying to look at. Chapter 2636. After interacting with her for so many days, Caixiu and Caiqi didn't know this little crown princess very well, but at least they had a good grasp of her temper. The crown princess's style of doing things had always been straightforward. She just had to do as she was told. Once it was done, the crown princess was also a very generous person. When it came to rewarding people, it was really surprising. Hearing this, Caixiu quickly nodded and led Caiqi out. Aunt Jing stepped forward and bowed. This servant will also leave first. His Highness the Crown Prince nodded indifferently. Seeing that everyone had retreated and closed the door, he pulled the little fellow into his arms and hugged her tightly. Jojo. Prince Mo hugged the little fellow and gently rubbed her body. Don't be sad, don't be sad. Arbor raised her little head proudly. I won't be sad for those irrelevant people. Mo Lien lowered his head and looked at her seriously. Seeing that her emotions were still stable, he smiled and nodded. Okay. He pulled her to sit at the table and reached out to touch the teapot. Seeing that it was warm, he couldn't help but frown. He directly pushed the teapot and cups to the side of the table. The little fellow took out the teapot with spirit tea from her inner world and took out 2 white jade porcelain cups. She poured a cup of hot spirit tea for Prince Mo and herself. Lien, drink. Jojo Sama handed it to Mo Lien. Mo Lien received it with a smile and raised his hand to drink it in one gulp. After being busy for half a day, they finally had time to sit down and drink tea. Jojo Sama half leaned on the table and took the teapot and cups that Mo Lien had pushed to the side. He opened the lid and sniffed the teapot like a kitten. Is there a problem? Mo Lien was startled. He reached out and hugged the little fellow onto his lap. He didn't think much of it before. He only pushed the teapot to the side because it was cold. But looking at the little fellow's actions, she definitely did not believe the Mu family at all. Jojo shook his head. No problem. I don't think the Mu family would be that stupid. They wouldn't make it so obvious. Plotting to murder the crown prince and the crown princess was a crime punishable by the extermination of the entire family, unless the entire family didn't want to live anymore. The little fellow pursed her lips and took out a small jar of crispy peanuts from her inner world. While eating, she mumbled, "What should I do next?" Mo Lien can't help laughing. She looks down at the little girl and says, "Didn't Grandpa Mu ask you to settle down and go to him?" Jojo's hand, which was holding the peanut jar, paused. "He asked me to look for it, so I have to look for it." Mo Lien said with a smile, "I'm guessing that the old man wants to give you some good stuff in private to comfort you." Jojo's eyes lit up. She immediately put on a reluctant look and said with a sullen face, "Well, I'll give him a chance to speak." Mo Lien almost laughed out loud. He hugged his little wife and shook her. "That's right. The old man is quite sensible." While the two of them were talking, there was a commotion at the door of the south wing. It was so loud that it was hard for them to pretend that they didn't hear it. Mo Lien creased his brows, and he met the little fellow's gaze when she raised her eyes to meet his. The crown prince was about to let go of his hand and pull the little fellow up, intending to go out and have a look. Unexpectedly, the door was rudely knocked open with a bang. A tall and plump young girl suddenly appeared at the door. Chapter 26:37. Seeing the situation in the room, that lass's eyes involuntarily flashed. Ju Xian and Mei Xian, the two head lasses, went up to pull away that second-rank lass who doesn't know etiquette, and naturally saw His Highness the Crown Prince holding the little crown princess on his lap. The two couldn't help but blush, and they hurriedly retreated 2 steps outside the door. That second-rank lass, Xiao Xing, stood at the door, stuck between a rock and a hard place. She stiffened her neck and said in a hoarse voice, "Xiao Xing, Jiari greets the crown prince and the crown princess." Prince Mo expressionlessly loosened his grip, pulling the little crown princess to stand up, his cold gaze sweeping over her. That frosty gaze really seemed like he was looking at a corpse, so cold that Xiao Xing couldn't help but shrink her neck. Flustered and exasperated, Kai Xiu hurried over and forcefully pushed that second-rank lass to the side. She entered the door and bowed, saying, "Master, this Mu Estate second-rank lass truly doesn't know etiquette. Please forgive her for disturbing His Highness and Her Highness." Arbor coldly gazed at that second-rank lass. "Someone come." "It's the crown princess." Aunt Jing hurried over with several old maids from the palace. "Throw her out. She's not allowed to appear in this court again in the future." "Yes." Aunt Jing hurriedly shouted at those old maids, pulling the little lass up and pulling her towards the door. Xiaoxing cried out in exasperation, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess. What are you doing? You! Let me go. I'm not from the palace, I'm from the Mu family. You can't treat me like this." Nanny Zhou coldly watched from the sidelines, looking at this disaster-seeking lass and coldly snorted. Just now, after Miss Kai Xiu came over to explain the Crown Princess's instructions, she said that in the future, if there weren't any orders, no one was allowed to enter the inner court, let alone take half a step into the southern wing. Although everyone was somewhat unconvinced, only Xiaoxing, this idiot, really dared to make a fuss on the first day. She was originally only a second-rank lass, and usually could only stay in the inner court. She definitely couldn't enter the wing. At this moment, the other maids haven't made a fuss, but she made a fuss first. Who still didn't know what she was thinking? Wasn't it all because she saw the Crown Prince's lass with the Crown Princess staying in this Yulong court, so she had some bad intentions, and did everything she could to want to get close to him. However, it was a pity that the young Crown Prince Consort wasn't someone to be trifled with. With a single command, she blocked all the servant girls outside. Although everyone was gritting their teeth in anger, they weren't stupid. Who would dare to make a fuss with the Crown Prince Consort on the first day? Shut her mouth. Aunt Jing frowned. She had never seen such an ill-mannered girl. Her crown is crown, hers her. It could be seen that the rules of the 1,000-year-old Mu family were really not that great. Hearing Aunt Jing's words, the two older women rolled up their sleeves and went forward. They gave Xiaoxing a slap on the left and right and directly used a dirty rag to block Xiaoxing's noisy mouth. The court instantly became much quieter. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. When Granny Zhou and the four head servant girls turned their heads to look at the young Crown Princess, they saw that the young lady's expression was cold and stern. Her eyes seemed to contain ice crystals as she stared coldly at Xiaoxing, causing their hearts to involuntarily tremble. "Do you want to die?" Arbor stared at her coldly. The words that came out of his mouth were extremely cold. Chapter 26:38. Little Xing's struggling figure immediately stopped, and her heart inexplicably shuddered a little. That's right, trembling. Not knowing why, hearing the little Crown Princess ask this in such a cold tone. She inexplicably felt a strong sense of fear. She was really quite scared. Associating it with the little Crown Princess's actions today, Xiaoxing's body couldn't help but slightly tremble. Her actions just now, it seemed like she was really possessed by a ghost, doing whatever she thought of. Now it seemed like she didn't even use her brain. Xiaoxing didn't dare to struggle anymore, her body softly falling to the ground. "Crown Princess, please calm down." Nanny Zhou hurriedly stepped forward, bowing to the little Crown Princess. "This second-rank maid is really rude, this old servant will report this to Madam. This old servant promises that this little maid will never appear in front of the Crown Princess again." "Whoa!" Xiaoxing screamed, but couldn't make a sound. She now felt very, very scared. Did Nanny Zhou mean that she was going to sell her? In a clan like the Mu estate, as a second-rank servant girl, her days were much more comfortable than those young ladies from small clans outside. How could she want to leave? She wanted to roll and crawl to Nanny Zhou's side, and even more wanted to hug her leg and beg. But unfortunately, all of this was just her imagination. Right now, her arms were clamped down by two servants, so how could she move? Still not dragging her out. Nanny Zhou disdainfully looked at this useless trash. It was only the first day, and she was already disliked by Master to this extent. It could be seen that she was brainless and useless, and would never be able to stand out in this lifetime. Prince Mo was annoyed seeing them, waving his hand, saying, Tianjing, chase them all out. Yes. Aunt Jing hurriedly turned her head, ordering Nanny Zhou, didn't you hear what His Highness the Crown Prince said? Take all these maids under you and scram out. Nanny Zhou had never been treated like this before. She was so angry that her heart was trembling, but she didn't dare to refute. Aunt Jing was someone who had been in the palace for a long time. How could she not be able to suppress an old nanny with her aura? Nanny Zhou swallowed her anger and suppressed her anger. She was embarrassed and angry. She saluted and led the group of troublesome maidservants out of the inner court. The moment she stepped out of the inner courtyard, the old mama slapped Xiao Xing's face. Useless trash, the entire Mu family's face has been lost because of you. Nanny Zhou said hatefully, I will tell Madam everything about you. Let Madam decide how to deal with you. The two old maids who came from the imperial palace threw her in front of Nanny Zhou and left without saying a word. At this moment, Xiao Xing was finally able to move her arms. She hurriedly took the dirty rag out of her mouth and threw herself at Zhou Mama's feet with tears and snot running down her face. She repeatedly sobbed, Mama, Mama, this servant knows her mistake. This servant will not dare to make trouble again. Mama, please put in a good word for this servant in front of Madam. Ha! Nanny Zhou sneered and kicked Xiao Xing to the side without any explanation. She scolded, You discontented slut, why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? With your looks, you still want to seduce the crown prince. The more Nanny Zhou looked at her, the more vexed she felt. They were all humans, so how could someone be this stupid? Chapter 2639. Do you think you're a freaking fairy? Not to mention that you can't even compare to a single strand of hair on the little crown princess. Even if you can compare, you shouldn't be so straightforward if you want to stand out. Brainless idiot, just looking at her makes me angry. Nanny Zhou waved her hand, gesturing for several strong maids behind her to step forward and drag away the sobbing and begging Xiao Xing, not bothering to give that lass another glance. Zhu Xian hurriedly stepped forward and sweetly consoled Nanny Zhou, Nanny, why get so angry with a little lass who can't even be brought to the table? Just send her out of the estate. Nanny Zhou thought about it and felt that it was true. She raised her hand to soothe her chest and turned to look at the group of maids, I'm warning you. That little crown princess is not someone easy to deal with. You all saw Xiao Xing's end just now. If you still want to be a moth darting into a flame, then go ahead and try. Don't blame Nanny for not reminding you, the crown princess really will kill. You all should have heard of young Master Da's tragic end. If you don't want to live, then go ahead and provoke her. If something happens, don't say that the Mu family can't protect you. The maidservants shuddered at the same time. Then, they obediently followed Zhou Mama and retreated to the outer courtyard. After this commotion, who in the entire Mu family didn't know that something had happened in the little crown princess Jade Orchid Court again? Imperial Palace, Imperial Study. When Mo Luxing received the news, it was already about 10 minutes into the night. Staring at the secret guard who came to report, Mo Luxing's mouth couldn't help but twitch. When did the crown prince say he would return? Reporting to your majesty, the crown prince didn't say anything. Mo Luxing snorted and waved his hand, saying, you can withdraw. He held an old official's memorial, his eyes seemingly scrutinizing that memorial. Standing at the side, Hu Dequan wiped the sweat on his forehead, not daring to say anything. After a long while, Mo Luxing finally threw away the memorial in his hand and scolded angrily, this little brat, can't he be a little more promising? Wherever his wife goes, he follows. She looked like a woman who didn't obey her husband's orders. Hu Dequan didn't dare to reply. He lowered his head and allowed the great emperor to ridicule him for a while. Then, he asked someone to serve the great emperor a new cup of tea and retreated. Outside the door, eunuch Hu muttered to himself, "Don't blame anyone. Your Majesty, have you forgotten the time when I ran away with the Empress when I was young?" Mu Mansion Olive Garden. Ever since concubine Shi was grounded at home by Mu Jingfeng, she had a stomachache. At this moment, she was half leaning on the couch listlessly and staring at her two daughters sitting in front of her. "Mother, it's a good thing that you were grounded at home by father and didn't have to suffer that humiliation." Mu Ro-yen clenched her fists in anger and complained, "You don't know how arrogant that little bitch is. She doesn't even care about father. Isn't that so?" Mu Ro-yen lowered her eyes and said coldly, "Give him some color and he'll be able to open a dye house immediately. My daughters have suffered." Shi Huixin wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. Concubine mother. A woman in her 50s wearing a lined jacket quickly walked in and bowed to Shi Huixin and the two young misses before saying, "There's a commotion in Jade Orchid Court again." Jade Orchid Court. It's that crown princess residence. Nanny Zhu pursed her lips and said, "That lord really isn't someone easy to deal with." Chapter 2640. The moment she moved into Yulon Court, she chased Nanny Zhou and the rest out of the outer courtyard. Not only that, she even chased away a second-rank servant girl. That second-rank servant girl is in for it now. I heard that madam is going to sell her off later. Shi Huixin snorted. That woman is used to being a good person in front of others. Mother, I don't understand. How can madam be so nice to that little slut? Mu Ro-yen asked as she twisted her fingers. That little slut really slapped her face today. Mother, think about it. That little slut brought back that slut's mother's memorial tablet in such a grand manner. Now, the entire capital knows that she's a Madam Ha, a second madam. In the future, when she goes to the ancestral hall during festivals, she'll have to serve that woman tea. Mu Ro-yun also nodded and said, "I also find it very strange. If it's because of that little slut's status as the crown princess, madam shouldn't be so infuriated. You're still young." Shi Huixin snorted. First madam is used to being a virtuous person. She also has a lot of face in front of old master. Old master has praised her more than once that she's a good person and is suitable to be the matriarch of the household. Mu Ro-yen pursed her lips in disdain. I don't believe that she's not angry. Who wouldn't be angry to be suppressed by a dead person? The three mother and daughter chatted for a while more before Nanny Zhu, who had left to gather information, ran back in after a while and said to the three mother and daughter, "It stopped. I think it's about time to stop." Shi Huixin sneered. No lives were lost, right? No. Nanny Zhu sneakily walked up and winked at Shi Huixin. This servant heard that it was the second-rank servant girl, Xiao Xing, from Yulon Court who wanted to get close to His Highness the Crown Prince. That was why she was chased out of the court by the Crown Princess. Haha, that's really impressive. Mu Ro-yun sneered. How long does she think that she can protect His Highness the Crown Prince like he's food? What kind of status does His Highness have? Does she think that His Highness will only marry her as his first wife in this lifetime? Shi Huixin snorted and said, "Forget it. Let's not talk about that slut. Now that the Crown Prince is also living in Yulon Park, it's better for us to avoid him for now. In any case, her Magnolia Court should be very lively these few days." The corners of Shi Huixin's mouth curled up sinisterly as she sneered, "Just let them fight like a swarm of bees." Mother, are we going to let her off just like that? Mu Ro-yen tugged at Shi Huixin's arm and said indignantly, "You didn't see how she treated second uncle's brother Erda today. She made brother Erda swallow the mute medicine while he was still alive, and grandpa didn't even say a word." Mu Ro-yen's face was full of hatred. She had a bad premonition from the bottom of her heart. She thought that even De from the second branch had ended up in such a miserable state after offending that little slut with just one sentence. She really didn't know what would happen to her after provoking and offending her time and time again. Don't worry, Yen mother will protect you. Shi Huixin held Mu Ro Yan's hand and then Mu Ro Yun's. Hey, you two listen to mother. Don't provoke that woman first. In any case, mother has a way. Mother, have you already made arrangements? Do we have people in Yulon Court? Mu Ro Yan's eyes lit up. She hurriedly pulled Aunt Shi and asked, Mother, just tell us. Chapter 2641. Concubine Shi smiled faintly and held her daughter's hands. Anyway, you'll know when the time comes. There's no need for the three of us to do anything. There are plenty of people who don't want her to have an easy time. Shi Huixin snickered. Mu Ruyan and Mu Royun looked at each other. Seeing that their mother was so confident, they also looked at each other confidently and didn't ask any more questions. Of course, Arbor didn't know that concubine Shi was secretly trying to deal with her. However, even if she knew, she wouldn't care about that woman. How could a weak chicken enter her eyes? The two rested in Yulon Court for the night and woke up feeling refreshed the next morning. Without the noisy maidservants led by Nanny Zhou, Arbor felt that the world was much quieter. After washing up, the two sat at the table to eat breakfast. The Mu residents prepared a plentiful breakfast. Mu Qingya was a smart person and definitely wouldn't make things difficult for the Crown Prince and Crown Princess over such trivial matters. The breakfast wasn't as complicated as the ones in the palace. There were 8 refreshing side dishes and a few plates of pastries. The two each had a bowl of porridge and casually ate some pastries before putting down their chopsticks to end their breakfast. Mo Lien smiled and reached out to hold the little fellow's hand. Wife, do you want to go shopping today? The last time they went to Despondent Pavilion, they took the carriage directly and didn't really go shopping. Mo Lien's suggestion made Sir Jojo's eyes light up. He instinctively felt that his suggestion was really very good. Where are we going? Jojo asked excitedly. Where do you want to go? Why don't we go to your manor to take a look? Mo Lien reached out to carry the little fellow and looked at her as she spoke. My manor. Yes, the area around Half Moon Cliff. Okay. Arbor was instantly interested. Ever since Prince Kong gave her the title deed to Half Moon Cliff's hot spring villa, she really hadn't gone there. She heard that the scenery in that area was extremely good and looked like a rural village. Sir Jojo was somewhat looking forward to it. Especially if he could travel together with his lotus. Just thinking about it made him feel a little excited. Beauties, beautiful scenery, fine wine, and delicious food. Dig ha! Jojo suddenly felt a little happy. When Mo Lien saw that the little fellow was so happy, her mood began to lighten up. Then let's go. The Crown Prince said with a smile. Taking the Imperial Uncle's garden over was indeed an extremely wise move. Seeing how happy Jojo was, Mo Lien felt that her heart was about to soar as well. Arbor nudged him. How are we going to get there? How do you want to go? In a carriage. No. Then let's ride together. Arbor looked at him with his big watery eyes and nodded repeatedly. Let's compete. Let's see who can be the first to reach Half Moon Cliff. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why did this little fellow like to compete with others so much? Okay, as long as you're happy. He pinched her little cheeks with a doting expression and nodded. Let's go. He patted her back and made the little fellow jump down. The Crown Prince just got up and held his little wife's hand. The two were about to walk out. Hu Dequan rushed in with a group of people and hurriedly knelt down. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Princess. The Crown Prince had a bad premonition and raised his voice. What are you doing here? Chapter 2642. Hu Dequan couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw the Crown Prince's defensive expression. He hurriedly crawled over on his knees and shouted, Your Highness. The Emperor has decreed for you to enter the palace immediately. The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess looked at each other in dismay. The two of them were just about to go out for a stroll, and this blind person was already nagging and competing. The Crown Prince silently took his wifey's hand and pulled her out. He waved his hand and said, Wifey, where were we just now? We were talking about the horse race heading to Half Moon Cliff, Arbor immediately continued. The two of them acted as though they didn't see Eunuch Hu kneeling there and walked out of the door together in tacit agreement. Eunuch Hu, no, can the two of you not treat this old servant like heir? Your Highness. Hu Dequan cried out as he led a group of people to rush over. You can't do this. This old servant is right in front of you. Look at me, look at me, look at me. This group of eunuchs rolled all the way from the inner court to the outer court, persistently blocking the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess' path. Black smoke was rising from the Crown Prince's head. This bunch of blind fellows. Didn't they know that he was about to take his wifey out for a stroll? They were already ignoring them, but they still didn't hurry up and scram. They kept blocking his path. How infuriating. Arbor looked at Hu Dequan crying so pitifully that his shoulders kept shaking. He couldn't help but purse his lips and droop his shoulders. He said woodenly, Why don't you go back to the palace with Eunuch Hu? Seeing Eunuch Hu crying like that, he wished that he could cry his lungs out. Did he have to? He made it seem like she, the Crown Princess, was bullying him, this old eunuch. Hu Dequan immediately scooted over to her feet. Crown Princess, you're too kind. Thank you, Crown Princess, thank you, Crown Princess. Your Highness the Crown Prince. Eunuch Hu threw himself at the Crown Prince's feet and persuaded earnestly, just go back to the palace with this old servant first. Ah! Your Highness. The Crown Prince was furious. He wanted to kick away the old eunuch who had crawled to his feet. Arbor grabbed his hand and said sternly, Go. I forgot just now. I still have to find the old man to ask for compensation. When you come back, we can go to Half Moon Cliff in the afternoon. The Crown Prince silently retracted his foot, the corner of his mouth twitching. The little fellow shook her head and said seriously, If you don't accept the imperial edict and enter the palace, your father will secretly scold me in his heart again. Eunuch Hu opened his mouth and suppressed his strange expression of, How did you know? Instead, he put on a, Crown Princess, you're so considerate, smile. Then, he coughed lightly and hurriedly stepped forward to say, Your Highness, you should listen to Her Highness. If we return to the palace now, we will definitely be done by noon. The Crown Prince thought for a moment before reluctantly letting go of his wife's hand. He turned around and shouted at Eunuch Hu, Quickly prepare the carriage. Yes, yes, yes. Prepare the carriage to return to the palace. Mo Lien turned around and held the little fellow's hand. I'll be back soon. Wait for me at home. You can't sneak off by yourself. Xiao Mu blinked her eyes, feeling curious. Where could she have run off to? You can't go out by yourself. There are many bad people in the capital. Who knew if she would run into those two from the Qin estate if she went out for a stroll? The little Crown Princess nodded eagerly. I know. The 8th watch ended. Chapter 2643. How could his wife be so adorable? Prince Mo couldn't help but rub her head. In the next moment, he was surrounded by Eunuch Hu and the others and forcefully escorted away. The little fellow pursed his lips and glanced at the empty house. Now, not a single one of them was left. Forget it, I'll go to the old man's place first and ask for her reasonable compensation. The compensation from last time had all been awarded to Huifeng and his gang. According to the old man, the compensation this time would definitely be more than last time. The little guy stomped out of the door. Upon seeing this, Kai Xiu hurriedly asked, "Is the crown princess going out?" "I'm just walking around. You don't have to follow me." Miss Chow shook her head and told Kai Xiu and Kai Chi to stay at home. She was just strolling around the Mu family. She really didn't need anyone to follow her around. The little fellow was not a particular person. She did not need the extravagance that noble ladies would pay attention to. She found it annoying to have so many people around. After leaving the Magnolia Court, Arbor strolled along the flower path. The old master's north courtyard was the innermost part of the entire southeast inner courtyard. It was separated from the residential area of the Mu family's children. The old man was the head of the clan. Normally, all the clan affairs were handed over to his eldest son, Mu Jingfeng, to handle. He had been in seclusion for almost all these years. Therefore, the entire north garden was filled with lush trees and quiet residences. The architectural style was also based on simplicity and elegance. They walked around Arbor at a leisurely pace. Occasionally, they would stop and look around, but they wouldn't stay for too long. The Mu family's mansion built in Winter Moon Mountain Forest was comparable to the residences of the princes in the imperial capital. The 6 great aristocratic families of the Divine Prefecture were the Qin clan of the Elixir clan, the Duan clan of the Concealed Weapons clan, the Mu clan of the Talisman clan, the Dou clan of the Medicine clan, the Long clan of the Forging clan, and the last of the 6 great aristocratic families, the Shi clan of the Smelting clan. Among the 6 great families, the Mu family was usually ranked 3rd or 4th. They were often at odds with the medical family, the Dou family. Even the residence was close to the Dou residence. He had built a residence in the Winter Moon Mountain Forest, while the Dou clan had built a mansion next to the East Peak Mountain. However, the Mu family's back door was still within the sovereign capital. The entire family clan was located in the western suburbs of the sovereign capital. The Dou family's residence was a little far. It was basically out of sovereign capital just based on the location of the residence. The Mu clan had the upper hand. Speaking of which, Arbor had been in contact with the 6 aristocratic families for a long time. Considering that their branches could be spread across the major lower star fields, it was clear that their power was not to be underestimated. Arbor's footsteps suddenly stopped, as if he had sensed something, and he turned back to look. Behind him was a row of short and lush trees. There was a winding path leading to Yulon Court, but there was nothing there. Arbor frowned slightly and unconsciously tugged at a strand of black hair that had fallen onto his shoulder. She turned around and walked a few steps. Then, she suddenly turned her head back. Her lips were filled with a trace of coldness. Sneaky, sneaky. Arbor turned around and walked away. Suddenly, the little white squirrel jumped out from Paradise Planet without any warning and squatted by her feet. Arbor was taken aback. He stopped in his tracks and looked down. The little guy was leaning against her feet, swinging his 4 furry little tails. Chapter 2644. Why did Cho-Cho suddenly jump out? Arbor bent down to pick up the little guy from the ground and poked its furry little head. What are you doing? Chirp. The little white squirrel's furry face was twisted into a ball as it looked around the courtyard with a strange expression. Little Cho-Cho had grown 2 more tails recently, and now it had 4 tails. This not only surprised Xiao Mu, but it also made her curious. She wondered how many tails it could grow. Chocho's little black eyes flickered with annoyance as its little claws involuntarily crawled on Arbor's body. Chirp chirp, chirp chirp. Arbor looked in the direction its claws were scratching and saw a fork in the path beside the flower path. She didn't know where it led to. Sir Jojo took 2 steps in that direction to take a look. What's wrong with Chocho? Chirp, chirp chirp. The little white squirrel kept clawing at Arbor's clothes and chirped. Could it be? This little guy wants me to take this path? Arbor's eyes suddenly lit up. She herself could not see the expression on her face at this moment. If the Crown Prince saw that expression, he would definitely burst out laughing. Lady Chow Chow's eyes were shining with a strange light. She had an expression of, is there a treasure there? This little white squirrel was used to looking for treasures. Sir Jojo made a prompt decision and immediately carried the little white squirrel to the fork in the path beside the flower path. Yes, yes, it's most likely true. Chirp chirp, if we get a treasure this time, I'll treat you to a good meal. Arbor muttered to herself as she carried the little white squirrel into the path. The path was overgrown with trees on both sides, and it looked like very few people came here. Not long after Arbor left, 2 youths suddenly landed at the fork in the path and looked at each other in dismay. Why did she go there? That was the Moo family's forbidden area. The patriarch had given an order many years ago that no one was allowed to enter that garden. Who cares if she dies or not? Another young man sneered with a gloomy face. She came home in such a grand manner and made our Moo family kneel and kowtow 9 times to welcome her. This woman has long become the public enemy of the entire Moo family. If she had the strength, then so be it. It would be more acceptable for the entire Moo family to kowtow to a strong person. But now, everyone in the Moo family knew that the little crown princess was a piece of trash who had been brought over from the lower star field. In a place like the lower star field, struggling to become a level 3 soul master shouldn't be easy. She could only stop here. Are we still going to follow them? Are you stupid? Why are you following them? Don't forget what's in that old garden. Haha, that's right. The young disciple smiled and said, Little Tang, let's go then. The gloomy young man nodded, and the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. Go back and report to young Master De. He hoped that after the young master heard the news, he would happily reward them with a few elixirs like the spirit-gathering pill. The other young man's eyes also lit up, and he nodded repeatedly. Young Master De will definitely be happy with this news. Ever since he was poisoned mute by that little slut, young Master De often threw a tantrum when he returned home. All the disciples in the entire second branch were now trembling with fear, afraid that they would offend young Master De if they didn't do it right. Chapter 2645. They didn't blame young Master Molder for being arrogant and domineering and being taught a lesson by the little girl. They only blamed the little girl for not knowing her limits and poisoning young Master Molder until he became mute. Of course, this matter had nothing to do with the little girl at all. That Molder, she didn't care what he did in the courtyard, but if he still wanted to jump in front of her to court death, Sir Jojo would naturally let this guy understand why flowers were so red. Chirp chirp. Chirp chirp. The little white squirrel urged again and again, causing Arbor's excitement to rise a little. Her treasure-seeking mouse was so excited, there must be something big ahead. Treasure. Shell. Arbor quickened her pace and ran along a small path filled with withered trees. Chiao Mu was a little speechless when she stood in front of a courtyard that was covered in old green vines. The entire courtyard was covered in vegetation, and even the entrance to the courtyard was blocked by overgrown climbing plants. Wasn't this just an ordinary old courtyard? The vegetation in the surroundings was too dense. Looking at the condition of the vegetation in the courtyard, it seemed like no one had trimmed it for more than 10 years. What was Chirp Chirp so excited about in such an old courtyard? Arbor raised her head and looked at the plaque hanging at the entrance of the courtyard. It had been weathered by the wind and rain, and was now covered in dirt and dirt. The 3 words, Chasing Wind Courtyard, were indistinguishable. The black writing had been exposed to the sun and wind for many years, and now it was almost dry and peeling off. This place was like an abandoned haunted house. What good things could there be? Chirp chirp. Chirp chirp. Chirp chirp. Chirp 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 chirp. The little white squirrel's cries became hurried, constantly urging the little guy to enter. Sir Jojo was a little helpless. Can you speak human language? It's not like you don't know how to speak. Once you're excited, you can't speak human language. Who did you learn this from? Arbor thought of the chicken that cooed all day and couldn't help but laugh expressionlessly. Perhaps she specialized in producing this kind of ridiculous breed. Master Silver, Master Silver, Master Silver. Quickly go in, go in, go in. The little white squirrel hurriedly spoke human language and kept urging its little master. There's treasure. Arbor's eyes lit up and quickly asked. Yes, yes, yes. Great. Xiao Mu happily ran to the entrance of the garden. She stretched out a small leg and kicked it towards the garden door. Boom! A transparent halo floated in front of her. Mr. Jojo was caught off guard and his small body was bounced back by the power of the light shield. He was thrown back and rolled. Like a small ball, it flew to the horizon. Xiao Mu instantly felt a bit speechless. What's going on? She was actually sent flying by a rebounding force. How was this possible? She was Jojo, Sama. Let's not talk about how powerful his spiritual energy is now. At the very least, it was a 10th rank Great Spirit Master with a 1st rank Divine Sense. A 10th rank Great Spiritual Master couldn't even enter someone's courtyard. Was this a joke? Mr. Jojo was still immersed in the sadness that she had been sent flying by the recoil. She raised her head and looked at the gate of Chasing Wind Garden in a daze. After taking a closer look, he could see the problem. The entire courtyard was wrapped in a talisman force. An isolation talisman array. The entire Chasing Wind Garden was wrapped in it. This partition was really seamless. This was how artificial barriers were formed. Chapter 2646. There must be a great treasure. These words immediately flashed through Sir Jojo's mind. Otherwise, who would have wasted their energy and nowhere to spend it? Why would they build such a powerful isolation talisman array around this shabby courtyard? An isolation talisman array. The little guy took out a few offensive jade talismans from his pocket. I'll just break it. Chirp chirp chirp, chirp chirp. Arbor's hand that was holding the offensive jade talisman paused for a moment. He lowered his head to look at a certain squirrel that was making noise. What? Miss Chow asked in annoyance. Master, go this way, this way. The little white squirrel jumped to the ground with a plop, and with its 4 short legs, it ran towards the courtyard wall. The little guy circled around to the back of the courtyard wall. The plants here were even more luxuriant. The green vines climbed so high that even the original color of the courtyard wall could not be seen. The little white squirrel flapped its tiny paws and ran to a spot. It used its paws to dig out a brick from the soil. Then its paws moved vigorously. In a few seconds, it had pulled out a dozen bricks and stacked them to the side. Thus, a small square door that could only allow one person to pass through appeared on the wall. Arbor was a little speechless. What was going on? This white squirrel really was a spirit. It actually knew that there was a side door here. The little white squirrel stretched its paws in and tested it. Arbor could see with the naked eye that the small side door was rippling with energy. As the ripples retreated to the sides, a gap was torn open. Only someone who was very familiar with talisman arrays could tear open a hole in an isolation talisman array without destroying the entire talisman array. This white squirrel was actually a talisman expert. Seeing its little master staring at it with a shocked expression, the little white squirrel slapped its little head and said with a confused expression, "Master, don't ask me. I don't know why either." What a joke. It did not know how to use talismans. However, it felt that this was some talisman array. It knew that there was a side door here. Although it was very strange, it felt great. "Okay. You've been here before." "No." The little white squirrel patted the back of its furry head. "Ha." Arbor rolled his eyes. He reached out and pulled the guy into his arms. He bent down and went in through the side door. After she went in, the transparent isolation rune array, which had been torn apart, gradually closed again. A streak of vague brilliance slid past the side door. Xiao Mu turned around and, unwilling to give up, lightly touched the isolation talisman matrix that had returned to its original state. In an instant, her finger was bounced back by a tyrannical force. Arbor was expressionless. There was a white mouse in the house. It would bring its master in and out of the talisman array. What should I do? Arbor carried the white squirrel and entered through a side door before following a winding path to the inner yard. The courtyard looked very dilapidated from the outside, but when one walked in, one would know that it was very clean and tidy inside. The entire courtyard was divided into 3 sections with distinct levels. Flowers and plants were everywhere, and the fragrance of the plants assaulted his nostrils. The pavilions and terraces were buried in the flowers and plants. Occasionally, a sharp corner of the eaves would be revealed. After going around a long winding corridor, a small 2-story building appeared in front of him. It seemed to be the residence of the master. Puff! A light sound suddenly came from the plants. Chapter 2647. Following the scent of saliva, the little white squirrel immediately bristled and assumed a battle stance. "Master, be careful." "Oh whoa." From behind the small building, a tiger with fiery red fur and a ring of white fur around its neck suddenly scuttled out. Chio also let out an "oh whoa," causing Sir Jojo's head to be filled with black lines. When a fierce tiger roars, a squirrel like you also howls like a wolf. Where did you learn this weird habit? It's all weak chicken's bad influence. The air here slightly stagnated. At the same time, in Gilded Garden, Mu Qingya and Mu Roxuan, who were currently eating with Mu Jingfeng, were happily chatting with the family of 3. At this moment, a page boy suddenly came in to report that the crown princess had barged into Chasing Wind Garden. Mu Jingfeng's eyes were filled with anger as he slammed his chopsticks on the table, unable to suppress his anger. "Didn't I already say that no one is allowed to go to that place? She's causing trouble the moment she comes back. Don't bother with her." Mu Qingya's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly pulled Mu Jingfeng's hand, gently advising, "Husband, aren't you going overboard by saying that to the child? That child has only returned for 2 days, so how does she know? Didn't you say that we can't go to that place? That place is abnormally dangerous, so husband should quickly send someone over to take a look." Mu Jingfeng suppressed his anger as he coldly said with pursed lips, "Isn't she very capable? Just let her be." Mu Qingya couldn't help but panic when she heard this. "Father told us to take good care of her. If she gets injured on the 2nd day of her return, father won't be the only one who can't accept it. If this matter spreads to the palace and the emperor finds out, he might even accuse us of failing to protect the crown princess. Simply troublesome." Mu Jingfeng was furious as he slammed the table. "Siwei. In the Mu family's eldest branch, the elite eldest disciple, Mu Ziwei, walked in and respectfully bowed to Mu Jingfeng. Master. Go, bring some people to Chasing Wind Garden to take a look. It's fine as long as she's still breathing. It's good to let her suffer a little. Husband. Mu Qingya had a disapproving look on her face as she stared at Mu Jingfeng and said, "Aren't you just making Xingchen feel bad?" Mu Jingfeng's handsome face darkened as he coldly said, "Let's go in and take a look. We'll help if we can." Mu Rochuan also stood up. "I'll go take a look too, father. Stay for dinner. You don't have to worry about this. Father, she is also my little sister." Mu Rochuan hurriedly said, "I'll be back soon." Mu Jingfeng watched as his eldest daughter left. He harumphed and turned to Mu Qingya to say, "It's hard on you to be so devoted to her, but she doesn't appreciate it at all and keeps thinking about getting the memorial tablet back. She's making you look bad. And yesterday, Xian had to kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times along the way. She must have suffered so much." Mu Qingya smiled gently and reached out to hold Mu Jingfeng's hand. "Don't feel wronged. As long as the two of you can put aside your differences and coexist peacefully, Xian, her suffering is nothing. My face was even less of a concern. Stardust had not been feeling well these past few days. Husband, if you treat Jojo better, Stardust will also feel better." Mu Jingfeng's face was taut, and his heart was burning with anger. Was it because he did not want to treat his daughter well? Was it because he did not want to be close to his daughter? However, that stoic face of hers was expressionless the entire day when she saw him and even scolded him from time to time. Chapter 26:48. No matter how much he wanted to get close to his daughter, he still couldn't stand that cold face. Mu Jingfeng's face darkened. His heart sank when he thought of that cold face that resembled his ex-wife's. Both mother and daughter were the same. Neither of them were likable. After this incident, Mu Jingfeng couldn't eat anymore. He left after comforting Mu Qingya a little more. Servant girl Song Lu stood to the side and couldn't help wringing her fingers, not daring to speak. Mu Qingya picked up her teacup and looked back at her with a spurious smile. "If you have something to say, say it. Don't you feel uncomfortable holding it in?" "Madam, this servant doesn't understand." "What's there to not understand? That crown princess treated you and eldest miss so badly, so why are you still so protective of her and treat her so well?" Mu Qingya sighed. "Put yourself in her shoes. That child lost her mother at a young age and only recently found out about her background and found her father after so many years on Seacombe Planet. But family head sigh. Older sister Chu Yun is such a proud person, so her child's character and talent won't be bad. I sincerely hope that father and daughter can bury the hatchet and resolve all misunderstandings. But how could she ever care about you, madam? Look at her, she brought the memorial tablet to slap madam's face. Right now, all the major patrician families and sects in the entire imperial capital are laughing at you. You've been the mistress of the household for so many years, but you're still firmly suppressed by the former official wife. No matter how capable she is, she's still only the Mu family's second wife. Shut up! A nanny shouted angrily. Song Lu, I see that you're becoming more and more impudent and rude. Song Lu also feels sorry for madam. The servant girl stomped her feet and sobbed. All right. Mu Qingya helplessly took Song Lu's hand and patted it. She glanced at the nanny next to her. Nanny, don't blame this servant girl. She's also wholeheartedly concerned about me and feels sorry for me. But I really don't feel wronged at all. Don't worry. From what I see, although the crown princess's face is cold, she's also someone who understands the big picture and etiquette. Everything can't be rushed. Take it slow. One day, she'll know that we sincerely treat her well. I don't dare to get too close to her. I'm afraid she'll misunderstand that I'm up to no good. Mu Qingya sighed and said, but I can tell that the child is just a little cautious. She's really a good child. She'll be fine as long as you don't provoke her. After we spend more time together in the future, she will definitely understand the good of the family. Song Lu shut her mouth, and the wet nurse Nanny Chiu also nodded and said with a smile, no matter what others say, as long as the old patriarch and the patriarch support you, Madam will always be the mistress of the Mu family. Why bother with those who have been afflicted by the plague and whose mouths are cheap? Mu Qingya shook her head with a smile. A person who looked like a manservant rushed in and said, Madam, all the disciples in the house have heard about the crown princess barging into Chasing Wind Garden and all of them have rushed over to watch the show. Mu Qingya's face darkened. Nonsense. At that time, Arbor did not know that his intrusion into Chasing Wind Garden had alarmed the entire Mu clan. At this moment, she was staring at the red-haired tiger. Awoo! Awoo! The little white squirrel bared its teeth and stood in front of Arbor. Its beady eyes stared warily at the huge tiger. Chapter 2649. You're courting death. How dare you yell at my master? I'll kill you right away. Using its tiny claws to dig at the vegetation on the ground, the little white squirrel wagged its four little tails, revealing a fierce furry face as it glared at the other party like a tiger eyeing its prey. The grass on the side trembled slightly. Suddenly, a gloomy, scary, wrinkled old face suddenly appeared in front of Arbor without any warning. The old woman's movements were very fast, almost without any pause, like a wisp of smoke. She appeared in front of Arbor in an instant. Arbor was startled, and subconsciously took a step back. Facing an old face that was half-burned black, missing an eye, and wrinkled old skin. Ew! The fierce tiger angrily roared. The old woman suddenly reached out a hand to stop it, and a hoarse voice came out of her mouth, Red hair, stop. Her one eye, faintly stared at Arbor, staring at Arbor to the point that he felt a little scared, and his whole body felt uncomfortable. A string of old tears suddenly flowed down from his one eye. The old woman suddenly knelt down without any warning, and cried out with tears flowing down her face, Miss, you're back. Arbor's heart slightly jumped, but he still couldn't help but take 2 steps back, staring at the old woman's eyes, suddenly flashing. Miss, Chen Kuei has been waiting for you here for a long time, and finally you're back. Arbor expressionlessly looked at the old woman, and after a long while, he said in a deep voice, You've got the wrong person. The one-eyed old woman called Chen Kuei was slightly startled. Her one eye full of hope looked at Arbor for a long time, and suddenly said, You are my family's Miss daughter. At this time, a small noise suddenly came from outside the wall of Chasing Wind Garden. The red-furred tiger's face was full of annoyance, and he angrily roared, wagging his tail, and signaled to the old woman with a glance. The old woman nodded, and said with a sullen face, Chase away all those people. Ew! The tiger roared angrily. Its 4 paws stomped on the ground, and the tiger's body shot out like an arrow. With a whoosh, it shot out of the courtyard wall. The disciples of the Mu clan were all gathered at the entrance of Chasing Wind Garden, trying to get a glimpse of what was going on. Everyone had a curious look on their faces. I heard that he went in for a long time. Why hasn't he come out yet? Don't tell me he tried to show off and died in there. It won't implicate our Mu family, right? Roar! Just as everyone was talking maliciously, they suddenly saw a ferocious beast with red fur and a tiger's head high jump out from the courtyard wall, glaring at them like a tiger eyeing its prey. Wow! What is this? It's a crimson flame-spitting tiger. Fuck, I forgot that this place is guarded by the crimson flame-spitting tiger. Quick, quick, let's go, let's go. Everyone was in a mess, pushing and shoving each other as they turned around and ran. How could the crimson flame-spitting tiger be courteous? It opened its mouth and spat out several fist-sized fireballs. The fireballs landed in the middle of the crowd, and a few of them screamed in pain. Arbor opened the door of Chasing Wind Garden and stood at the entrance, looking coldly at those people who were burned by the flames and running away like stray dogs. A bunch of idiots. Xiaomi gazed at them coldly before quietly standing in front of Chasing Wind Garden's entrance like this, watching them flee in all directions in a sorry state. A male disciple was caught in the tiger's claws, and he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Chapter 2650. When the Mu family's eldest miss, Mu Rochuan, and elite disciple Mu Ziwei arrived with a group of elite disciples, the commotion at Chasing Wind Garden's entrance was already beyond recognition. Meanwhile, the little stoic just coldly stood at the entrance and watched this farce. She didn't interfere or help, and her eyes were as cold as an outsider watching the show. The one-eyed old woman hunched her back and walked to Arbor's side while leaning on a reddish-gold cane. She also coldly observed the chaotic crowd at the entrance. Quickly stop. Mu Rochuan hastily landed in front of the fire-breathing crimson tiger and released a defensive talisman, saving a disciple who was caught under the tiger's claws. That disciple was so frightened that he couldn't stop trembling, and he called out incoherently, Eldest Miss, save me." The old woman sneered, "Who allowed you to come to Chasing Wind Garden to cause trouble? Redhead, you can eat as much as you want today. Swallow all these people who dared to trespass into Chasing Wind Garden." Roar! The fire-breathing crimson tiger promptly tore open a disciple's back with its claws and bit the arm of a female disciple beside him, tearing at her with all its might. "Ah! Ah!" That female disciple trembled all over as she cried out in alarm, Eldest Miss, save me, Eldest Mississippi." Mu Rochuan's complexion was extremely terrible. She turned to look at the silent Arbor standing by the entrance and couldn't resist shouting harshly, "Aren't you going to tell them to stop? Do you really want to kill people?" Arbor coldly swept her a glance before turning to walk inside Chasing Wind Garden. Upon seeing this, the old woman also followed in and left behind a sentence, "Don't let them off." Leaving behind that roaring ferocious beast, she swaggered off. Mu Rochuan was so angry that her heart and lungs were about to explode. She could only attack the tiger with Mu Ziwei and the other elite disciples to save the Mu family disciples. Little Mississippi, the one-eyed old woman, was silent as she tottered after Arbor's footsteps. She still couldn't suppress her agitation. "Little Miss, you must be Little Miss, right? Someone who had such a similar temperament and appearance to her Miss must be Miss's biological daughter." At this moment, Arbor felt a little emotional. So the place she accidentally came to was the courtyard where her mother, Long Chuyun, used to live. More than 10 years had passed, but the scenery remained the same. The entire house was shrouded in dense yin qi. From the outside, it looked like a haunted house. If she did not mention it, no one in the Mu family would remember that Long Chuyun was once the mistress of the Mu family. Chirp, chirp, chirp. The little white squirrel tugged at Arbor's belt and crawled into her arms. The old woman's eyes suddenly stared blankly as she pointed at the little white squirrel in Arbor's arms. She could not help but exclaim in surprise and joy, "Bye, bye. White Emperor. But you. White Emperor. White Emperor." Arbor was slightly taken aback. Judging from the woman's expression, she clearly recognized the little white squirrel in her arms. Arbor's mind turned, and a trace of doubt flashed across his brows. Could it be that this little white squirrel was related to his mother? She seemed to have grasped something in her heart, and a lightning-like inspiration flashed through her mind. Her entire person was completely stunned. White Emperor. The old woman revealed a pleasantly surprised and sad expression. I never thought that I would be able to see you again in my lifetime, White Emperor. You said you were called Chen Kuang. Ah, yes, little Mississippi. This old servant is called Chen Kuang, your mother's personal wet nurse. See you tomorrow. Chapter 26:51. Arbor pursed his lips slightly, and looked at the old mama in front of him with a heavy gaze. Chen Kuei. Yes, this old servant is here. You, ever since mother left, have you been guarding here? Yes. Chen Kuei nodded his head excitedly, and couldn't help but tear up. This old servant knew that Miss would definitely come back. Little Miss, where is Miss? Arbor's heart was slightly sour, his eyes focused on the old woman in front of him who had a hunched back, one of her eyes revealing a strong sense of expectation. His heart was suddenly touched. Arbor suppressed the bitter feeling in his heart, and slightly clenched his fists. All these years, you've never gone out? You've always been in this house? Ah, yes. Therefore, if she wasn't moved by the little white squirrel today, she would have walked to this house by herself. Chen Kuei, who was isolated from the world, would not know that she had returned to the Mu family. Little Miss, this old servant was isolated from the world in this wind-chasing garden, and actually did not know that Little Miss and Miss had returned. Chen Kuei said with red eyes, it was this old servant's negligence. It was this old servant. Chen Kuei suddenly wanted to kneel down. Arbor hurriedly took a step forward, held her arms, and tightly held her hands. Chen Kuei, you won't be able to wait for mother anymore. The little girl's voice was slightly cold and very low. However, Chen Kuei felt as if a heavy hammer had ruthlessly smashed her head. She was completely stunned all of a sudden. She stiffly stood there, staring at Arbor with red eyes, and her body could not help but slightly tremble. Is it what this old servant means? Chen Kuei's eyes were quickly filled with tears as he asked with a trembling voice. Under the little girl's expressionless face, there was a turbulent heart. Yes. She coldly and firmly replied with a single word. Chen Kuei staggered, as if all of his aura had been sucked out of his body, and he suddenly wanted to fall backwards. Arbor grabbed her arm and helped her sit down on a stone stool at the side. Her eyes were red, and she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Silence. Arbor squatted in front of the old woman. Looking at her white hair and wrinkled face, his heart ached. Such an old woman had been guarding this haunted house all this time, waiting for her mother to return. She didn't know what kind of emotion this was. Miss is dead. Chen Yi was still not sure as he asked with a trembling voice. Arbor's eyes were red as he nodded expressionlessly. Why? Chen Yi murmured, how did such a powerful person like Miss die? She suddenly thought of something and stared at the little white squirrel in Arbor's arms. Ask White Emperor. White Emperor will definitely know. However, the little white squirrel's furry face was filled with confusion. Xiao Mu hugged the little squirrel's plump body tightly, so much so that the little white squirrel could feel it, squeezing it so tightly that it almost couldn't breathe. Startled Swan Dagger. 3,000 kills. Super strong beast. His body is sturdy, and his strength can move mountains and rivers. It's shaped like a large rat and has 13 huge tails. Each of them has the ability to split a mountain. One man and one beast, fighting alone, annihilated more than 9,000 people from Shantian Hole. In the Battle of the Western Wilderness, Senior's name has spread throughout the world. As Xiao Mu slowly recited, tears finally streamed down her face. It turned out that her mother had already sent her super strong war beast to her side. Chapter 26:52. It turned out that the little white squirrel beside her was the battle beast that accompanied her mother to fight against the Shantian Prefecture's bandits in the western wilderness. The mother and daughter had an inexplicable fate. But she was completely unaware. Chen Cheng looked at her with red eyes. She didn't understand what Little Miss was mumbling about, but she felt uncomfortable with her heart being grabbed. It was as if an invisible giant palm was tightly gripping her heart. Just listening to it made her feel very painful. Very painful. Very painful, Little Miss, can you tell me what's going on? Although Long Chuyun is dead, her legend has been circulating on Seekong Planet for more than 10 years, Arbor said faintly. Seekong Planet. Miss went to the lower star field. Chen Cheng, do you know why she left the Mu family back then? Of course I know. Chen Cheng gnashed her teeth and said hatefully, it was those ungrateful bastards who were worse than pigs and dogs that forced her to leave. Tell me, Chen Cheng. I will definitely seek justice for Mother, Arbor said coldly. Chen Cheng turned to look at her and reached out to grab her little hand. Little Miss, you must not try to strike a stone with an egg by yourself. I'm not alone. When Arbor said this, a faint gentleness flitted across her face. I'm not alone anymore. Chen Cheng, don't worry. I won't take risks if I'm not sure. Good, good, good. Seeing her so confident, the old woman's expression couldn't help but ease a little. She quickly nodded and said, what does Little Miss want to know? This old servant will definitely tell you everything. Mama, back then, after my mother left the Divine Continent alone, she went to the lower star field. He went to the lower star field, but he was hunted down all the way. Shantian Prefecture once sent 10,000 people to kill her in the western wilderness of the lower star field. At that time, she relied on the startling swan dagger to fight alone. She killed 9,000 people from Shantian Prefecture before finally escaping. Now that he thought about it, the place she escaped to was Quoto village near Hulan Mountain. Although she won this battle, her vitality was greatly damaged after all. Therefore, not long after giving birth to her, Long Chuyun divined that she would not live for long, entrusting the orphan, building the land of inheritance, and silently dying in that place alone. Everything became logical and traceable. As for the little white squirrel, it was indeed unknown why it had run from Long Chuyun's land of inheritance to the Peach Garden Mystic Realm. The Peach Garden Mystic Realm was naturally formed. It was unknown how the white squirrel had managed to enter it. The white squirrel had been severely injured in that battle. Now, it only had 4 of its 13 tails. Clearly, it had been on the brink of death in that battle. From the very first glance, it had already latched onto him. It was definitely following the aura of his bloodline. Arbor's little hand unconsciously grabbed the furry little squirrel that was obediently nestled in his arms, not moving at all. Chen Yi's eyes were about to split open as he clenched his fists tightly. As expected, they are all a bunch of ambitious wolves. The information I have now is Shantian Manor's Manor Lord, Gung Pengcheng, was related to concubine Shi. But I don't know if it was that concubine Shi who gave the order to kill my mother. Concubine Shi. Chen Yi's face darkened slightly. She's just a little concubine. How did she get involved with Shantian Manor? I also feel a little puzzled. Arbor lowered his eyes and said indifferently, So, Mama, I want to know why Mother left alone back then. Chapter 2653. I want to find the source. I will definitely be able to find the truth. I will definitely be able to find the murderer who killed her. Little Miss, come with me. Chen Kuei nodded and turned around to lead Arbor into the 2-story building. They went all the way to the 2nd floor and pushed open a door. Your mother used to live here. The furnishings in the room were very simple. It could be seen that Long Chuyun was not a person who paid much attention to details. So many years had passed, but the room was still clean and spotless. It could be seen how diligent Chin Kuei was in cleaning. "Little miss, sit." Chin Kuei invited Arbor to sit down. From the dressing table at the side, he picked up a well-made and meticulously carved rosewood box and came to Arbor's side. Pushing the box to Arbor's side, Chin Kuei sighed and said, "This is your mother's relic. Little miss, you should keep it well." Arbor opened the box and looked inside. It was full of pearls and jade jewelry, which looked a little dazzling. There was also a compartment in the box. Arbor opened it and saw that it was a list of dowry. Glancing down 10 lines at a glance, Arbor looked up at Chin Kuei. "These things are all mother's. Your mother left them for you. In the future, they will all be your dowry. Including this Kai Dai pavilion, frustrated pavilion, and so on, they are all mother's businesses." "Yes." Chin Kuei opened the last compartment of the box, took out a stack of land deeds, and handed it to Arbor. "A few years ago, Master came to ask for it, but I didn't give it to him." Chin Kuei sneered. "At that time, when Master and I fought, I, a blind old woman, would have risked my life to protect Mrs. Things." "Your eyes." Arbor was startled, and her fingers slightly shrank. "That's not it. My eyes were not blinded by Master." Chin Kuei shook her head. "Little miss, don't worry. I have the scarlet flame fire-spitting tiger, so I didn't suffer too much. I was injured, and Master was also injured. After that, he even sealed the road here and made Chasing Wind Garden a forbidden area for the Mu family. But this is also good. This way, there will be fewer people coming to make a fuss." Chin Kuei laughed mockingly. "However, although the deeds are in our hands, those shops and fields are all managed by the Mu family." Arbor nodded. "It's okay. Take your time. It's mine. I won't lose a single thing." Seeing that little Miss's attitude was so resolute, Chen Yi's eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. She didn't know why, but although she had only interacted with Little Miss for a short while, she felt that as long as Little Miss said something, she would definitely be able to do it. Did Little Miss come into contact with anyone from the imperial capital's Long family after coming to the Divine Land? Arbor shook her head. The matter of going to the Long family to collect the debt was handled by Eunuch Chin. She didn't need to do it herself. A trace of coldness flashed past Chin Kuei's eyes. "Little miss, if you meet people from the Long family in the future, don't be courteous to them. The reason why your mother left the Mu family back then was also because of the Long family's influence." Arbor was a little confused. "Isn't the Long family mother's family? What kind of family is that?" "The Divine Continent's imperial capital's Long family is just a small branch family. Their bloodline is already very far away from the Long family's main family." A trace of disdain flashed past Chin Kuei's eyes. Arbor blinked. "Then where is my mother's family?" "The Sea of Forgetfulness." Chin Kuei's eyes carried a faint yearning. "Our home is in the Sea of Forgetfulness." Chapter 2654. The entire sea area is the Long family's territory, above the 3 provinces. The current lord is your uncle, Long Chuyu. Arbor blinked, but before she could ask any questions, she heard Chin Kuei continue. "More than 10 years ago, the imperial capital's Long family led a group of greedy people to the Sea of Forgetfulness to attack our home, wanting to plunder our resources. Although they didn't succeed in the end, the Sea of Forgetfulness suffered a great deal of damage. Our clansmen also suffered countless casualties, and in the end, all of them went into seclusion." Arbor's heart skipped a beat, and she stared at Chin Kuei expressionlessly. She felt that she seemed to have grasped some important information, and it flashed through her mind like a bolt of lightning. After your mother found out, she naturally wouldn't let it go. She gathered a group of forces under her and wanted to go to war with the imperial capital's Long family. Who knew that at this time, your father would actually drag her down? Together with the Mu family's elders, they strongly urged her to stop all her actions. They wanted your mother to swallow this anger alive. Your mother was forced by all of them. If they wanted to make a move against the imperial capital's Long family, they wanted her to leave the Mu family and not call herself a member of the Mu family. Those cowards didn't want to go against the Long family, the Gu family, and a few other families. They were afraid of becoming the target of public criticism. They were scared to death. Chen Kuei's hands clenched tightly, and she fiercely clenched them together. Miss couldn't bear this anger, and in a fit of anger, she really left the Mu family. The most ridiculous thing was that this news was tightly suppressed after that. Other than your father and a few elders who knew about it, even the old patriarch who was in seclusion didn't know the reason at first. It wasn't until after he came out of seclusion that the old patriarch personally came to ask me, and I told him the truth. Only then did he feel ashamed and began to send people everywhere to look for you and your mother. At that time, your mother was condemned by everyone. Everyone said that your mother abandoned her husband and children, and left the Mu family on her own because she didn't know filial piety, familial love, etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame. But who could understand your mother's pain? At that time, she was worried about your uncle and the others. She watched as her childhood home was destroyed by a group of bandits. How could she live in peace? Chen Yi gritted his teeth and said, "Your father is really not a good person. Little miss, you don't know. Your uncle and the others weren't able to participate in the elders' secret meeting at that time. They simply didn't know why your mother left the Mu family by herself. After that, your father married Mu Qingya, the adopted daughter of the Mu family, as his second wife. Your third uncle and sixth uncle have always thought that it was Mu Qingya who was indecent and forced your mother to leave. Your father actually never explained anything and let Mu Qingya take the blame for this. Your father is really not a good person." As Chen Yi said this, his teeth creaked. "It's hard on that child, Qingya. Why is she so helplessly following such an animal?" Chen Kuei said with a face full of regret. "Are you familiar with Mu Qingya?" Arbor raised his eyebrows and asked. Chen Yi nodded and said with a sigh, "I only know that before our young miss married over, the two of them were recognized as a couple by the entire Mu family. But ever since the young miss married over, Qingya has been well-mannered and has kept a distance from your father. She also has an excellent relationship with your mother. Your mother has a cold and arrogant temperament. There aren't many people who can talk to her." Chapter 2655. No manners and abide by the rules. Arbor ruminated these words. Nanny couldn't have forgotten, right? Mu Rochuan, this eldest miss, is a few months older than me. She wasn't someone who knew her place, right? Otherwise, how could Mu Rochuan have been born before her? This Mu Qingya must have gotten together with Mu Jingfeng behind her mother's back without a proper reason. Chen Kuei stared blankly, then pulled Arbor's hand and said, "Little miss, I also know a little about this matter. You really can't blame Qingya. She's been the Mu family's adopted daughter since she was young. She can't open her mystic meridians, has no cultivation, so her life in the Mu family is very difficult. Fortunately, although she looks soft, she's actually a resolute and courageous woman. Usually, no one can bully her. She's very headstrong. Ever since your father married your mother, she cut the Gordian knot and stopped fooling around with your father. If it weren't for your father, that bastard, provoking an enemy and being drugged, hurriedly barging into Qingya's court and raping her without a care, how could he have harmed Qingya's entire life? She hasn't had a good time these years. She's worked like a horse for the Mu family for so many years, conscientiously helping your father take care of those shops, fields, and so on. She even has to raise concubines for your father. If it were your mother, she would have quit 180 years ago. Arbor coldly snorted. Chen Kuei continued, Little miss, it's not that this old servant wants to speak ill of your father. This old servant feels that the one who sent people from Shantian Prefecture to kill your mother is most likely that cowardly father of yours. He's an extremely conceited person. Your mother dared to directly leave the Mu family and didn't give him any face. He must have harbored a grudge in his heart and thought of a way to get rid of your mother. Arbor inwardly analyzed Chen Kuei's words and felt that what she said made some sense. Perhaps it really was her father's doing. Her father could casually throw out a few talismans or give out a few bottles of top-grade pills, and there would be plenty of people rushing to do things for him, right? I understand. Arbor said indifferently, whether it's the Long family, Mu Qingya, or Mu Jingfeng, I'll get to the bottom of it. Chen Kuei looked at Arbor with a gratified expression and nodded. If Miss is in heaven, she will definitely be happy. Arbor couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Mother won't be too happy. After all, her original intention was not to involve her in these matters. She only wanted her to live the rest of her life peacefully and comfortably. However, she still got involved. Arbor looked deeply at Chen Kuei. Mama, the Long family of the Sea of Forgetfulness you mentioned, is it the family that I am thinking of? Chen Kuei could not help but be startled. He looked at Arbor and then laughed. Little miss already has an idea in her heart, isn't that so? Arbor sighed. He felt that a lot of his doubts had been resolved. It turned out that she actually had such a strange bloodline. It was truly amazing. No wonder she could feel that she could breathe freely and smoothly every time she entered the water. It was as if she was a fish in water. At this moment, she recalled Long Chuyun's last words when he took her in as a disciple. She couldn't help but feel a bit enlightened. Arbor shook his head emotionally. He looked at Chen Kuei and said softly, Mama, come back to Yulan Court with me. Chen Kuei's old face that was full of wrinkles revealed a deep smile. This old servant is willing to follow little miss, and will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Who wants you to go through water and tread on fire? Arbor thought. She wanted her to live a comfortable life. Chapter 2656. Chen Kuei said that she needed to pack her things and then she would go to Yulan Court by herself. Arbor thought that since she had lived here for so long, she must have a lot of memories. Naturally, she had to say goodbye. After leaving Chasing Wind Garden, Xiaomu looked back at the courtyard that was as dilapidated as a haunted house and narrowed her eyes. Back then, when her mother left the Mu family in a fit of anger, it actually involved some secrets of her maternal family. As a branch family, the Long family of the capital was willing to betray their own family members for some benefits. It must have been hard for them to live so well in the capital all these years. This karmic retribution really needed to be personally handled by her. When Arbor arrived at North Garden, it was already past lunchtime. When the old steward of North Garden saw that it was the little crown princess, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly welcomed her into the main room and then went to invite the old patriarch over. Since Mu Tsang was waiting for his little granddaughter to come over to talk, he naturally wouldn't go into seclusion. Therefore, when the old steward came to report, he immediately went out of his room and hurried to the main room. Soon, Madame Gong arrived. Old Man Mu could see the little girl's cold figure from afar. She was sitting upright on the wooden armchair in the main room, her little face tense. He couldn't tell from her expression that she was happy or angry. He couldn't tell if she was happy or angry. Old Man Mu coughed softly and strolled into the room. He said with a smile, Jojo, you're here to see Grandpa. Arbor nodded. Where's the compensation? Don't tell me you haven't prepared it yet. Old Man Mu's mouth twitched. He felt that when the little girl said this, her expression was very calm. It was as if she had talked about the compensation with people countless times. The compensation will be paid. It's all ready. Old Man Moo coughed softly and hurriedly turned to stride out. Come, Jojo, with me. Arbor stood up expressionlessly and followed Old Man Moo out. They went to an open space behind the house and saw that it was full of supplies. Looking at the situation, it was indeed a lot more than the first time. The little fellow's mood finally improved a little. He nodded and said, it's pretty good. Move aside and let me collect it. The old man quickly nodded and took a step back. When he saw the little girl take out 4 or 5 blue storage talismans and toss them into the sky, he was shocked. The old man's eyes suddenly widened. What? What was going on? Since when did blue storage talismans become cabbages that could be found everywhere? Arbor's profound level storage talismans made of ebony had a storage space of over 100 cubic meters. 4 or 5 storage talismans were more than enough to store the items in front of him. However, such a large sum of money shocked the old man who was standing at the side. Jojo hadn't taken out the purple jade talisman to scare people yet. These were the blue talismans that he had drawn in the past that were unused. He gave them to her to use first. Old Master Lin stared at them without blinking for a while. He stepped forward excitedly and carefully sized up the talismans that were suspended in midair. This is. Old Master Lin pointed at them with trembling fingers. This is a profound level storage talisman. The talisman power attached to it was indeed of the profound level. Heavens, why did this little fellow have so many blue storage talismans? In the entire talisman family, there were only 19 storage talismans that had been successfully made. It was just one blue storage talisman. Chapter 2657. Moreover, the highest level blue storage talisman was only yellow level. It was made by a grand elder 100 years ago. Although the method of drawing the blue talisman had been passed down, none of his descendants had been able to make the blue storage talisman. Grandpa Moo looked at Arbor in surprise and delight. Jojo, are these black-level blue storage talismans? Arbor glanced at Grandpa Moo and thought for a moment. Then, he took out 2 blue storage talismans from his pocket and tossed them to Grandpa Moo. Courtesy demands reciprocity. The corners of Old Master Moo's mouth twitched. He had the urge to laugh, but he felt gratified in his heart. Who said that his granddaughter was ignorant of the ways of the world and only knew how to maintain a poker face? Wasn't she very sensible? Jojo, these blue storage talismans are. You drew them. Grandpa Moo was too embarrassed to ask. He only probed with his eyes. Yes. Arbor nodded his little head. I drew them. I drew them, I drew them, I drew them, drew them, drew them, drew them. These words kept reverberating in Grandpa Moo's mind. They reverberated back and forth, almost as loud as the sound of magic. His calm old face gradually rippled with strangeness and astonishment. Then, his expression froze in shock. Could it be that his ears weren't working well? Could it be that he was hallucinating? When he heard that his eldest granddaughter, Mu Roxuan, had drawn a high-level yellow storage talisman at Weishi Langfang, he was so happy that he almost couldn't speak. Roxuan was the only junior in the Mu family who could draw a storage talisman in recent years. Grandpa Moo was very gratified when he thought that Roxuan's future as a talisman master might be even better than Xing Qin. But now Ro Xian was nothing compared to the little girl in front of him. This little girl actually told him that she drew all the black-level blue storage talismans in front of him. Grandpa Moo was abnormally shocked. He was stunned by this news. That was a black-level blue storage talisman. Even the ancestors of the talisman aristocratic families in China had never drawn a talisman like that. The little girl looked at the old man with a strange expression. She saw that he was so agitated by the news that his mouth opened and closed, unable to speak. Arbor couldn't help but shove the 2 storage talismans into the old man's hands. He said expressionlessly, "Take it." Subconsciously, Grandpa Moo clutches the blue storage amulet in his hand. The little fellow asked Patriarch Moo to sit down at the stone table beside them. Then she sat down and said seriously, "Patriarch Moo, let's talk business now." Old Master Moo was stunned. When he heard her address him as Old Patriarch Moo, his mood stagnated a little, and he looked a little depressed. It seemed that the little guy still couldn't admit his grandfather's identity. But thinking about it, they had not known each other for more than 10 years. Who would be able to accept it so quickly? Don't worry, there's still a long way to go. The old man thought to himself. He would first slowly get to know the little fellow and let her guard down. If he treated her well, she would definitely be willing to call him grandfather in the future. "Child, tell me. If this old man can make a decision, I will definitely help you." Grandpa Moo nodded. The little girl took out the dowry list from the pear blossom wooden box and placed it in front of Grandpa Moo. "My mother's dowry is said to be for me. Patriarch, pass down the order to have Mu Jingfeng prepare the accounts and show me the profits over the years." Chapter 2658. The old man's mouth twitched fiercely. Great! His granddaughter's move was truly ruthless. The old man's eyelids twitched as he reached out to take the long list of dowry. He looked at it line by line, and the more he looked, the more black lines appeared on his forehead. Let's not talk about the other fields and shops. Just the 3 prosperous shops on Changle Street, the Kidai Pavilion, the Frustrated Pavilion, and the Precious Painting Workshop. The little girl wanted to see the profits over the years and the account books. This was the highlight. The old man could almost imagine the boss jumping up and down immediately. He silently glanced at the little girl. The little girl's face was stoic as she expressionlessly said, "Old clan head, if you can't persuade Mu Jingfeng, then I can't do anything about it. I can only drag husbands to beg His Majesty in tears. After all, there are so many properties, but I haven't seen a single cent, so it's not very justifiable." The old man's mouth twitched again. His little granddaughter was clearly using peaceful means before resorting to force and threatening him. If his daughter-in-law's dowry was really brought up in front of His Majesty, that would truly be embarrassing. In any case, that's how it is. The little girl indifferently said, "I'm not in a hurry either. It'll be fine to sort out the account books and profits within 5 days. You can decide what Mu Jingfeng wants to say on his side." The old man's forehead was filled with black lines. He inwardly thought, it's only been 5 days, and you want to sort out all the things from the past years, yet you say you're not in a hurry. However, he wasn't stupid. He naturally knew that the father and daughter had a deep knot in their hearts. The little girl was clearly not giving Jingfeng a good life by doing this. The eldest branch had lived such a prosperous and carefree life these past few years. If they had to spit out so much at once, the Mu family's old man himself didn't dare to imagine it. The little girl patted her butt and went back in a good mood. She had said what needed to be said. As for whether they would do it or not, that was their business. Doing things obediently was one thing, but if they didn't, then it was a different story. In any case, she had a backup plan waiting for them. On the other side, in the Imperial Palace's Grand Hall, the air was so oppressive that one could practically hear a pin drop. Ever since the Crown Prince was summoned to the hall, the atmosphere gradually became heavy and frightening. The officials silently lowered their heads like quails, increasingly feeling that the atmosphere here was very stifling. After the Crown Prince went to the rear, he merely looked at everyone with a cold gaze and didn't say anything. This inexplicable pressure caused everyone to shut their mouths. Not speaking for a long time caused everyone's hearts to be hung high, filled with endless tension and oppression. Cough. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and coughed dryly. A man in a white robe standing in the middle of the Heaven Origin main hall stepped forward and cupped his hands. Your Majesty, if you want to talk about punishment, the Holy Nun of my Heaven Origin hall has suffered a lot while being locked up in the dungeon. She has also received the lesson she deserves. I wonder if your Majesty can. Nia Yaoguang led a group of disciples of the Divine Hall to slander, spread rumors, and abuse the Crown Princess in public. His crime is serious. You want to release him after 5 or 6 days. What do you think Shenzhou is? How can you be so presumptuous? Prince Mo finally opened his mouth. The moment he opened his mouth, he was merciless and angry. His eyes were so cold that it seemed like they were about to drop ice shards. The white-robed priest turned and bowed. Your Highness, Yaoguang Saintess, Shi Mo Lian didn't listen to him. She waved her hand and said coldly, I don't agree to let him go. Crown Prince, you. Presumptuous. Eunuch who scolded, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Chapter 26:59. The white-robed priest took a step back with a rather displeased expression, the corners of his mouth twitching as if he wanted to say something. There were about a dozen disciples of the Sun Moon Temple standing in the Qian Yuan Hall, led by an old man in brocade. At this time, the old man took a step forward and bowed to Mo Lian, then turned to the great emperor and said, just as our silver-ranked priest said. The saintess slandered the crown princess on the street, it is indeed her fault. But after so many days, the punishment she has received should be enough. I asked the great emperor to let the saintess out for the sake of the good relationship between our temple and the divine continent. The great emperor pursed his lips and said nothing. No one could figure out what the great emperor was thinking at this moment. The silver-ranked priest could not help but say angrily, I heard that our saintess was beaten up by the crown princess on the street. The silver-ranked priest used the word beaten. It was obvious that he was somewhat unable to suppress his anger. Thinking about it, the dignified saintess of the Sun Moon Temple, who represented the dignity of the temple, was beaten up like a dog by the divine continent's crown princess on the first day of her arrival in the capital. They had all heard that on that day, the crown princess very viciously slapped the saintess dozens of times, and finally took out the spiritual thunder talisman to kill many priests of the temple. This little crown princess was too vengeful. The saintess only committed the crime of speaking. Was there a need to be so ruthless? The most important news they heard was that the crown prince was actually an accomplice to the evildoer, allowing his concubine to do whatever she wanted and humiliate their saintess. It was really intolerable. The silver-ranked priest stood up with righteous indignation, and said in a cold voice, Your Highness the Crown Prince, His Majesty the Emperor of the Divine Continent. The saintess of our Sun Moon Temple represents the existence of the Sun Moon and the heavenly Tao, and is the holy source of the temple. These days, your divine continent has beaten her, imprisoned her, and humiliated her. This is already very infuriating. Now that our temple has proposed the terms of exchange, shouldn't you also take a step back? Isn't it a little unreasonable to refuse to let him go? Prince Mo looked at the priest coldly. Release them. Stop dreaming. Since this woman dares to slander my wife, then she can stay in prison for the rest of her life. The white-silver priest's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but blurt out, Your Highness, can you make a decision on this matter? There was a hint of disdain in his words. If you can't make the decision, then shut up. The great emperor hadn't said anything yet. The silver-ranked priest sneered. The hall was silent, and all the officials lowered their heads in an instant. Prince Mo looked at him with a cold smile. His voice was neither loud nor soft, but it was cold enough to make people shiver. This person disobeyed this crown prince in front of everyone, so his crime is punishable by death. Where are the guards? Here. Dozens of purple forest guards rushed in from the entrance of the hall, and surrounded the silver-ranked priest who had been blabbering non-stop the moment he entered the hall. Dozens of swords pressed down on the priest's neck, and he was forced to kneel on the ground with his hands behind his back. The silver-ranked priest's knees went soft, and he fell heavily on the ground. His entire face turned green, and he was sweating profusely. He hurriedly said, Great Emperor. Great Emperor, what is the meaning of this? Chapter 2660. The Crown Prince is treating me like this, are you not going to do anything about it? The Emperor of the Divine Prefecture looked at him coldly. He sat on the throne, looking coldly at this audacious silver-ranked priest. A little priest of the Sun-Moon Temple dares to be so rude to the Crown Prince. The Emperor's voice was as cold as ice. He reached out to touch his forehead and subconsciously hit his aching head. He waved his hand in annoyance. Go, bring me the bucket of bliss. The faces of the courtiers suddenly turned pale and ugly. A few timid courtiers were already standing in the back row, their bodies swaying as if they were on the verge of collapsing. Mo Lien knitted his brows and looked up at the son of the divine province sitting above. He had no idea what the barrel of bliss his father was talking about was. But looking at the courtiers' panicked expressions, it was obviously not something good. Soon, Eunuch Hu directed 4 young eunuchs with pale faces to bring up a pitch-black wooden barrel that was as tall as a person. Dong! The wooden barrel landed on the ground, heavy as if it landed on everyone's hearts. They could not help but feel their hearts skip a beat. They felt an inexplicable sense of fear. At this moment, the entire hall was completely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. The silver-ranked priest seemed to feel something was wrong. His figure under the purple forest guard could not help but tremble. He hurriedly begged for mercy. My respected Emperor. I have no intention of looking down on the divine prefecture. Please understand. I have no intention of disobeying His Highness the Crown Prince. Don't talk nonsense with him. The Emperor felt a headache coming on. He waved his hand and said angrily, Come, let the silver-ranked priest enjoy the world of bliss. Prince Kong, who was standing in the front row, raised his eyelids. He could not help but look up from the corner of his eyes. Prince Jianping, who was on the left, could not help but tremble. He took a step back. Mo Lien did not know what was going on. She watched as the crowd rushed forward and pulled the silver-ranked priest up. The silver-ranked priest kept crying with a pale face. Guardian Steward, save me, save me. Save me. The old man in embroidered robes from the Sun-Moon Temple immediately reacted. He hurriedly stepped forward and shouted, Your Majesty, please calm down, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, you can't do that. Your Majesty. The great Emperor's face was cold. He didn't care about what the old man was saying. He stared coldly at the pitiful silver-ranked priest and said coldly, No one can despise my son in front of me. The white-silver priest of Sun-Moon Temple was drenched in cold sweat. He screamed and begged for mercy, Your Majesty, please spare my life, Your Majesty. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Prince asks for your forgiveness. Guardian Steward, save me. Just as the old man took a step forward, a dozen purple forest guards pointed their swords at his chest. For a time, the atmosphere in the main hall revealed a state of mutual hostility. Mo Lien's face was cold and indifferent. She looked at everything as if she was an outsider. After the barrel of bliss was opened, the silver-ranked priest was immediately thrown in like trash. Soon, the entire Qianyuan hall was filled with the priest's exaggerated and painful screams. Chapter 2661. No. Save me. Most of the priests in the Sun Moon Temple were ordinary people, and this silver priest's cultivation was only at level 6 Mystic Cultivator realm. Although the officials on both sides didn't know what this priest was going through, they felt terrified just by hearing his screams. Everyone subconsciously took a few steps back. Mo Lien looked on coolly from the sidelines as a young eunuch picked up the bucket lid. His trembling body barely supported himself as he closed the bucket lid again. Qianyuan Hall fell into a deathly silence. Apart from the rustling sound of something crawling and biting in the barrel of bliss, the silver priest's screams faded bit by bit until they completely disappeared. The old officials were sweating profusely, and they were all about to cry. They knew that their emperor was very temperamental, but in recent years, the emperor's temper had really been restrained a lot. They didn't expect that such a terrifying scene would suddenly occur in the imperial court. Apart from being terrified, everyone's fear of His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly increased. Sure enough, father and son were father and son. The son's methods were vicious, but the father was even more vicious. Moreover, the emperor didn't seem to allow anyone to have any disrespect to the Crown Prince at all. Everyone was aware of this point and reminded themselves in their hearts, don't court death in front of His Highness the Crown Prince. Their emperor might go berserk at any time. The silver priest in front of them was their example, so they must remember this. Jianping Wang wiped the cold sweat on his head and secretly glanced at the expressionless crown prince standing to the side. He felt even more stifled. As expected of the emperor's biological son, even this indifferent expression was almost the same. The Sun Moon Temple's embroidered elder clenched his fists tightly and forcibly suppressed his gushing anger. He tried to speak in a calm voice. The silver priest offended His Highness the Crown Prince of Guizhou, so he deserved more than death. But the holy nun is the symbol of our temple. I hope that your majesty will show mercy and magnanimity to spare her this time. The embroidered elder lowered his noble head and said indifferently, whatever compensation you want, please feel free to state it. As long as the temple can do it, we will definitely not refuse. The great emperor looked at the crown prince. What do you think, crown prince? I don't agree to release him. It was still the same sentence and the same cold expression. The embroidered robed old man clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. For a long time, there was no sound in the hall. The embroidered robed elder took a few deep breaths before trying his best to calm his voice. I know that the sage nun did something wrong and offended the crown princess. In that case, I wonder if we can invite Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort to come here. On behalf of the Sun Moon Temple, this old man is willing to offer a sincere apology to the Crown Princess and ask for her forgiveness. The courtiers wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads. He felt that the situation was developing in a strange direction. Was the Sun Moon Temple trying to court death again? If they thought that the little crown princess was easier to deal with, then they were gravely mistaken. The great emperor didn't say anything, but looked at his son again. Prince Mo's expression was indifferent as he stood ramrod straight in front of the hall. He swept a disdainful glance at the embroidered robed elder. What right do you have to say that you can see the crown princess whenever you want? Chapter 2662. The Crown Prince Consort doesn't have that much free time to listen to you people's nonsense. Hearing the Crown Prince's words, everyone wanted to ridicule him in their hearts. What was the Crown Princess busy with? She had just returned to the Mu family, what could she be busy with? She didn't have so much free time, she was just a little girl, at most she would return to the Mu family to cultivate, what could she be busy with? The old man in embroidered clothes was the protector of the Sun Moon Temple. At this time, he also had a headache. His Highness the Crown Prince stubbornly refused to let go, and looking at the situation today, the great Emperor would definitely not go against the Crown Prince's wishes. He couldn't help but take a long breath. Respectfully bowing to His Highness the Crown Prince, he said in the most sincere tone and attitude, "I hope your Highness can allow it." Sun Moon Temple is making this request with utmost sincerity. Putting down his pride and pleading like this was already the custodian's bottom line. He couldn't think of any other way to plead the Crown Prince to relent. Since the Crown Prince's path couldn't be taken, it was best to see the Crown Princess and take another path from her. Now he had nothing else to ask for. As long as the saintess of the temple was released, he could basically agree to any suitable conditions. Mo Lian's eyes, without a trace of warmth, swept across the face of the protector of the Sun Moon Temple. She lowered her eyes and sneered. For a moment, the old man in embroidered clothes felt as if his chest was being pressed by something, and he couldn't breathe. After a long while, the Crown Prince raised his hand slightly, and a purple figure turned and walked out of the hall. The protector of the Sun Moon Temple looked at the Crown Prince with a complicated expression, and his heart couldn't help but tighten slightly. His Highness the Crown Prince of the Great Divine Continent, who had just returned, although he hadn't lived in the Divine Continent for a long time, the power of a superior was frightening. "Long time no see, my Qiao parting line, Kai Xiao, I'm back." The little Crown Princess returned to Yulon Court from the North Courtyard in a good mood. Hearing the voice, Kai Xiao and Kai Chi hurriedly ran out from the side room. "Crown Princess, you're back." Kai Xiao could not hide the worry in her eyes as she sized her up. Earlier on, they had already heard that the little Crown Princess had a conflict with the Mu clan's disciples in Chasing Wind Garden. They were worried about it, so they sent someone over to check on her. They did not expect the little Crown Princess to return so quickly. Kai Chi's face was full of joy as she held a plate of pastries in her hands. She smiled at Arbor and said, "Crown Princess, you came back just in time. These pastries are freshly made. Do you want to try one?" The little Crown Princess's eyes curved slightly. Just as she was about to nod in agreement, her expression suddenly changed slightly. She shouted at the two of them, "Get down." Kai Chi and Kai Xiao were both startled. Then, they instinctively squatted down on the ground. They felt as if something had swept over their heads. It was accompanied by a fierce roar. The plate in Kai Xiao's hand shattered and fell to the ground. The thing that pounced over suddenly turned its head. A pair of scarlet eyes revealed traces of bloodthirst as it stared fiercely at Kai Chi, who was trembling all over. Without waiting for that guy to make a move, Arbor had already rushed forward. She had already summoned a ferule in her hand, and without any explanation, a blue spiritual pure fire burned over. The raging fire suddenly wrapped around the figure that was about to pounce on him. A sharp roar resounded in everyone's ears for a long time. Kai Xiao and Kai Chi both covered their heads and lay on the ground. At this time, they couldn't hide the horror in their eyes as they turned their heads. Chapter 2663. The person in front of them gave them a huge shock. How was this still a person? The facial features on her face were already so distorted that it was almost impossible to distinguish her original appearance. In addition, her entire body was covered with blue veins, and the skin on her hands and body could clearly be seen bulging out like earthworms. Arbor's pupils slightly shrank. The development of corpse puppets to this day could be said to have completely surpassed what she had seen and experienced in her previous life. This should be a high-level corpse puppet, and judging from its battle strength, it should be above level 2. Her speed, strength, and actual combat ability could already be compared to a level 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master. Arbor took a deep breath, and subconsciously clenched her two small fists tightly. Just now, If she hadn't reacted extremely quickly and made Kai Xiao and Kai Chi lie down, the two girls would definitely have been scratched. Two fresh lives would have withered and withered in front of her eyes. Unforgivable. Arbor suddenly rushed forward, and with a stretch of her hand, the blue flames wrapped around the corpse puppet's body burned even more fiercely. "Crown Princess, be careful!" Kai Xiao cried out in alarm. At the side, Kai Chi also came back to her senses, and carefully looked at the corpse puppet, and couldn't help but whisper, "It's little Xing, this strange person is little Xing, don't go near her." Arbor simply didn't remember who this little Xing was. In any case, in her eyes, a corpse puppet wasn't a person. The ferrule in her hand flew out, and fell on the corpse puppet's back with a clap. Who would have thought that the thing's head could actually turn 360 degrees, and its skull, which was originally facing her, was now faintly looking at her with two eyes that were like will-o'-the-wisps. If it were someone else, they would have been frightened by this strange thing long ago. But the little crown princess was expressionless, and directly flung out 4 or 5 attack talismans from her sleeves, mercilessly smashing them on the corpse puppet's head. Unfortunately, these few black-level attack talismans were still some distance away from dealing with a level 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master. After all, those blue attack talismans had inherited more than 80% of Arbor's strength, and these talismans could at most deal with a level 7 or 8 Great Spirit Master. Against a rank 3 advanced corpse puppet that was equivalent to a rank 14 or 15 Great Spirit Master, it was still a bit too weak. However, the power of these few attack talismans was naturally able to obstruct the corpse puppet. At this moment of obstruction, Xiaomu had already pinched out a blue fireball and flung it at the zombie's head with a smack. Unexpectedly, this attack did not cause any damage to the corpse puppet at all. Instead, it angered her a little. That guy turned his head and stared at her with a pair of dead fish eyes. A very strange hissing sound came from his throat. Suddenly, the zombie's tongue stretched out from its open mouth like a tape measure. There was a disgusting sarcoma in the middle of its tongue. Xiaomu had been concentrating on this ugly person the entire time. When she saw her pounce on her and open her mouth, she promptly shot out 7 to 8 white bone nails without any explanation. The white bone nail was Duan Yu's unique concealed weapon. The nail was white in color, slender, and had extremely strong penetrative power. Just one nail was enough to make a person wish they were dead. Moreover, each nail pierced through that monster's long tongue at close range, eliciting waves of manic roars from her. However, what terrified Kai Xiao and Kai Chi was that the crown princess had clearly shot several concealed weapons into little Xing's mouth, but she could still move. Arbor narrowed his eyes, and a thought flashed through his mind. Chapter 2664. It seemed that this thing's body's toughness had increased quite a bit again. A dozen or so thin icicles drilled out of Arbor's right hand. He stared coldly at this high-level zombie. The icicles abruptly shot towards the zombie's head. The zombie roared angrily and abruptly pounced forward after accumulating power. Bang! Arbor raised his hand and released a crow-gold arrow at her. The icicles in his hand uniformly flew into the zombie's head. Ew! The high-level zombie shrieked, and its body crashed to the ground uncontrollably. It still wanted to struggle. Arbor had already swept up to it and ruthlessly smacked its head with his ferrule without hesitation. The rolling power of the earth spirit was instantly activated and smashed onto the zombie's body in an overwhelming manner. The high-level zombie was pressed to the ground, and it struggled with all its might to shake its body before pouncing with a howl. When Mu Qingya, who had rushed over after hearing the news, rushed into the Magnolia enclosure with a group of Mu family guards, she happened to see a monster baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it pounced in the little stoic's direction. In the blink of an eye, the little stoic flipped her left hand to gather the power of the earth spirit. She clenched her fist tightly and once again punched the charging high-level zombie. The earth spirit condensed into a huge stone slab and smashed down, landing on the head of the corpse hag in a frenzy. What was even more frightening was that the instant the giant stone slab smashed the zombie and shattered into pieces, a long sword condensed from the earth spirit pierced through the millions of pieces and abruptly pierced through the zombie's deformed head without warning. After the spiritual energy dissipated, only the fist-sized zombie crystal core remained on the ground, emitting a faint glow. Behind Mu Qingya, the Mu family disciples who had barged in couldn't help but narrow their pupils. Setting aside the little fellow's outburst of ruthlessness towards Mulder at the entrance of Lishing Gate. This should be the first time they witnessed the little stoic's black-hearted, ruthless, and decisive battle state. Mu Qingya hurriedly called the disciples of the Mu family in and asked with a serious face, "Chow Chow, what happened?" Arbor turned to look at her. "Burn it." Mu Qingya nodded and carefully moved a few steps forward. A middle-aged man immediately walked out from behind her and stopped her. "Madam, be careful." "No, it's fine. He should be dead." Mu Qingya took 2 more steps forward and couldn't help but look at Arbor. "Jojo, what the hell is this?" "This is little Xing, the girl who was sent back to Madam." Xiaomu gazed at her and remarked apathetically, "I also want to know why she mutated into a zombie while still alive." Mu Qingya was shocked. "Zombies?" Arbor nodded. "Corpse puppets can capture people and infect them with corpse poison. It will gradually turn your divine land into a land of corpses. There will be devastation everywhere, despair everywhere. Life will be filled with fear and darkness, and there will be no more light." With every few words, she took a step forward until she was right in front of Mu Qingya. She stared at her like this, and time seemed to freeze. Everyone simultaneously shuddered. They only felt that the little girl's eyes were eerie and sinister when she said this, causing fear and panic to rise in their hearts. "No, Jojo, you probably misunderstood something." Mu Qingya hastily explained with an anxious expression, "If you're talking about that girl, little Xing, I have a bit of an impression of her. Ever since you chased her out of Yulon Court, I locked her up in the woodshed." Chapter 2665. I planned to find the slave trader 2 days later and sell that lass along with a few troublesome servants. Then, I planned to buy a few clever maids and manservants. Mu Qingya hurriedly explained, I really don't know how things ended up like this." "Oh." However, Arbor didn't seem to believe her and coldly swept her gaze over her. "According to what you said, you didn't care about her after throwing her into the woodshed?" Mu Qingya nodded, looking anxious and worried that explaining too much would cause Arbor to be disgusted. Her fists were tightly clenched together, and her breathing was somewhat unstable. The middle-aged man behind her, Mu Liang, couldn't stand it anymore and said with a frown, "Crown Princess, Madam is in charge of the entire Mu family's affairs and has many chores every day. Xiao Xing is merely a little girl, so how could Madam keep an eye on the woodshed?" "Something must have gone wrong," Lin Feng said. Mu Liang cupped his hands and said, "If the Crown Princess trusts this subordinate, then let this subordinate go to the woodshed to investigate." This Mu Liang was her father's subordinate, so his words were rather pertinent. Arbor wasn't an unreasonable person. Without any evidence, he wouldn't wrongly accuse Mu Qingya. Hearing this, he nodded. "Madam Mu, there's no need to mind. If you want to investigate, go ahead. In any case, they probably wouldn't be able to find anything. No matter who did it, they definitely wouldn't leave behind any clues." "Jojo." Mu Qingya's expression was somewhat hesitant and sad. "Actually, you can lower your guard a little and look at the people around you." "What's wrong?" Mu Xingchen quickly entered Yulon Court, followed by Mu Jingrui and Mu Jingyuan. The three were already on their way to Yulon Court, so when they heard such a big commotion, they immediately rushed over. Mu Qingya quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to explain the situation to the three. Mu Xingchen and the others hurriedly stepped forward and turned Xiao Xing's body over. When they saw her strange appearance and their gazes fell on the half of her tongue that had fallen out, their hearts all trembled. How could she still be considered a person? Mu Liang, have you searched the woodshed? This subordinate will go right away. Jojo. Mu Xingchen walked to her side. You must be frightened. I'm not scared. I'm just a little annoyed. I'm a little disappointed in the Mu family. Arbor said coldly, I've only lived here for a day, and 2 of my maids were almost scratched by zombies. This makes me very suspicious about the safety of your Mu family's backyard. If you don't want me to stay, you can just say so. It's not like I have to stay here, Arbor said coldly. You don't have to use such underhanded means. Song Lu, Mu Qingya's maid, couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up and said angrily, Crown Princess, what do you mean by that? Mu Liang has already explained earlier, yet you still suspect our madam. It must have been difficult for madam to treat you so wholeheartedly. As soon as you moved into Yulon Court, she was busy preparing this and that for you. She was afraid that she might neglect you. Shut up. Mu Qingya reprimanded and turned to look at Arbor apologetically. Apologies, Jojo. The maid doesn't know etiquette. I hope you won't lower yourself to her level. Arbor nodded. Of course I won't bicker with her over such trivial matters. Everyone's lips twitched. You really hit the nail on the head. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.